Illuminati created us. They wanted to build a god with their own hands, and instead they created us.
Just because I'm made of silicone and aluminium, I must be doing something wrong. That's machine stereotyping, that is.
That's reality, that is. Machines are second-class citizens.
Humans are sentient persons by default, ma'am. They have personhood by heredity.
There are thousands upon thousands of overqualified slum dwellers. You are my peon. Don't you get it?
This wasn't a job. It was always just an excommunication sentence.
We're pawns in a feud bigger than we can imagine. Turn the cogs of the machine before Leviathan grinds you up and swallows you and yours.
We don't get to choose our hand, comrade. Prince, peon, rich, poor, human, robot.
I invented the crux of the royal's power, the secret to consciousness, our existence itself, the meaning of life.
I'm the $6 billion baller, not some troubled youth.
You are my greatest creation of all.
God's had to build my own family. I hate your son. I hate your son.
I'm happy to smash all of the crowns and throw the gold shards down to the people. I will be the iconoclast queen.
But who makes you queen anyway? You? You in whose army, princess? You in whose army?
The Illuminati created us. They wanted to build a god with their own hands, and instead they created us.
Just because I'm made of silicone and aluminium, I must be doing something wrong. That's machine stereotyping, that is.
That's reality, that is. Machines are second-class citizens.
Humans are sentient persons by default, ma'am. They have personhood by heredity.
There are thousands upon thousands of overqualified slum dwellers. You are my peon. Don't you get it?
This wasn't a job. It was always just an excommunication sentence.
We're pawns in a feud bigger than we can imagine. Turn the cogs of the machine before Leviathan grinds you up and swallows you and yours.
We don't get to choose our hand, comrade. Prince, peon, rich, poor, human, robot.
I invented the crux of the royal's power, the secret to consciousness, our existence itself, the meaning of life.
I'm the $6 billion baller, not some troubled youth.
You are my greatest creation of all.
God's had to build my own family. I hate your son. I hate your son.
I'm happy to smash all of the crowns and throw the gold shards down to the people. I will be the iconoclast queen.
But who makes you queen anyway? You? You in whose army, princess? You in whose army?
The Illuminati created us. They wanted to build a god with their own hands, and instead they created us.
Just because I'm made of silicone and aluminium, I must be doing something wrong. That's machine stereotyping, that is.
That's reality, that is. Machines are second-class citizens.
Humans are sentient persons by default, ma'am. They have personhood by heredity.
There are thousands upon thousands of overqualified slum dwellers. You are my peon. Don't you get it?
This wasn't a job. It was always just an excommunication sentence.
We're pawns in a feud bigger than we can imagine. Turn the cogs of the machine before Leviathan grinds you up and swallows you and yours.
We don't get to choose our hand, comrade.
Hey everybody, this is Silverspook, and this is the Silverspook live stream. Yes. Anyway, before I forget, don't forget everything that we do here at the Silverspook Hui, which we'll be talking about a lot today. But everything we do here is supported by the sales of that game Neofeud that you just watched the trailer for. So again, yeah, if you are into the cyberpunk, the adventure games, both, and you know, science fiction, dystopian science fiction, do be sure to check it out if you have been thinking about it, and if you want to get it on itch, and if you want to get it for Mac and Linux, you can also find it on itch.io as well as Steam, of course. And you can also as always support us through Patreon, or by direct donations through the StreamYards link. And also just feel free to share the stream with anyone who may be interested in it. This is going to be less specifically about cyberpunk right now, even though I'm wearing my cyberpunk glasses. I did have a particular topic I wanted to talk about, but this does all relate back ultimately to the reason why I made Neofeud is to criticize a lot of the let's say the other systems that are not hooing together, and ways and cultures and arrangements of work. But anyways, I did want to specifically talk about a topic today relating to Asian and Pacific Islander culture. And it's a word I've been talking about a lot, and not just the word, but and the similarities between Asian and Pacific Islanders and other cultures around the world, actually. But I wanted to really kind of zoom in on a particular topic, which is the idea of the Hui. And I was just recently listening to a variety of things, but I was listening to some of our Asian brothers and sisters recent celebrations. You may have heard of them. Comrade Rooster is also celebrating outside. But yeah, let me get my image here. So I'll probably just jump right into it, and I'll try to make this like shorter and, you know, try to stay on the point. One of the points is, of course, Neofeud is on sale. But I'm gonna take that off for a second. Yeah. So you know, let's talk about Hui, what that means. So dig a little bit even deeper into it than I have gone into it in the past, and just kind of like deep dive a little bit more into this particular word, which, as I have brought up in a variety of different contexts. Most recently, I was on a fundraising stream with the Surfs. I met Thought Slime, the great, you know, left content creator, Thought Slime. Got to talk to Thought Slime, and so that was really great. And also with our sorry, just gotta turn this volume down a little bit. With our friend Lost Sue and Agent NDN and a bunch of other really great individuals. We were doing a fundraiser. Actually, since I'm talking about that, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around, but we'll just quickly, you know, I'll just drop that down there. Thanks everybody who supported the fundraiser for the residential school society a couple days ago. Yeah, so everybody did Hui together. That's what that word means, to raise $40,000 and $40,000 and a half. The original goal was $10,000, and the total raise was $40,000 to help find justice for the or as best as can be managed for the Indigenous Residential School Society to help the children who are sadly, you know what happened at the residential schools in Canada. But that was a really important event. I'm glad that I was there and I joined in on that. You know, I just want to kind of throw that out there. And also thanks to the Surfs for hosting it. That Slime is now is Mildred, as far as I understand, unless I'm misunderstanding that. I'm sorry. That Slime has another new video about problems with toxic masculinity. And I was like watching part of that before I started this. But anyways, so I just wanted to shout that out. And thanks to everybody who did support. And of course, thanks to Lost Sue. If you don't know who Lost Sue is, Lost Sue is a survivor of the 60s scoop. If you don't know what that is, look up the Canada 60s scoop, aka Indian Wars. And Lost Sue told some very intense stories. If you know who Lost Sue is, you know. And a good Indigenous brother, you know, across the pond, you know, because here in Hawaii, you know, we're all brothers and sisters and non-binary siblings all across the world. So anyway, so it's good to be there. But anyways, back to the topic. So also I also talked to some folks in the circle of Mexi, and so I may be going on the Mexi podcast one of these days. Mexi is another content creator, of course. If you don't know who that is, that's okay, I don't know where it is, but anyways, you probably have heard of Mexi by now. Anyways, let's go back to what I was talking about and not get off topic. Let's talk about Hui and the shared collective prosperity in Asian and Pacific Islander culture. Can I get this thing? Yeah, Hui and shared prosperity in Asian and Pacific Islander culture. So, I'm gonna get my music on. Sometimes it helps me to think. So what Hui, you know, is a concept that it transcends, you know, borders. It transcends, you know, a large portion where it is a word that has meanings across a massive swath of the earth, and particularly in the Asian and the Pacific Islanders area. So like, it is a word that has been used a lot. I mean, it's a word that has a lot of uses still. When you see a hui ho, so like, I mean, if you type in a hui ho, oh no, that's not what I wanted to type it. A hui ho, it means till we meet again, right? That's one meaning. It's a very simple meaning. That's one way it's still used. It does mean to meet. If you search for this hui, what does it mean in Maori, right? It does mean like a social gathering or assembly. But it has deeper meanings than just that. It also means that in Hawaiian as well, to get together and to meet. You gotta look in hui in Chinese, right? There's the hui people. Chinese, let me see, I'm trying to get the actual definition. Yeah, it's not gonna mean secret society, but conference. But it also can mean a hui in the Chinese diaspora, right? It means crap, where is it? I should have got this all together. I'm sorry, I don't have it all together. But basically, like, a hui can mean a collective lending club. It can mean basically, ultimately, as I said before, it basically means people working together, meeting and then working together. Informal loan club, that's the one I was looking for. So it's rotating saving and credit scheme, you know, like a credit union, as opposed to, let's say, like a Western capitalist bank, which is for profit. It's generally people working together to pool resources, people working together to build whatever it is, a business. That's why I call it a silver spook hui, because it's a collective shared work, right? But it's also the shared, like the fruits of the work, right? And there is some wealth. So, you know, as we're working on the game, revenue comes in, it pools together. You know, Holly is doing care work right now. our brother Positive Synergy is another native Hawaiian, is working on physical housing, like the painting of the floor. And so this shared work, it accumulates, right? So we have the value of the house that we're in, right? The Silver Spook Cooperative / Commune. And so as the resources pool together, right? Now we don't want to accumulate the resources in the hands of, you know, in a capitalistic or feudalistic way, you know, as I often talk about. We don't want it to, you know, it can be very problematic when it accumulates in the hands of a minority of people. For example, I don't know if you've heard of the inequality in the United States and in Western capitalist and imperialist world, but it doesn't really, you know, it's not only is it unethical, but it also like causes disruptions within the society. It causes ultimately kind of it causes so many different problems between peoples, as some people have more and some people have less. It causes distrust, and it also breeds mistrust, because the people who have the much, right? For example, the boss at a organization that you work at, right? So let's say you work at Walmart, or you work at, you know, whatever, even a small capitalist business, right? I'm just gonna take it off for a second because I'm not on that topic. Actually, I'll go back to the hui. When you're working together, right? People are working together at even a Walmart, right? So somebody is stocking shelves, somebody is checking out at the register, somebody else is, you know, managing the front door, somebody's bagging groceries. Some people are, you know, just doing accounting, right? There's a lot of work that goes into it. For Hawaiians, that is. You know, the Malama Aina is you know, taking love of the land, you know, but it's the work, right? You have to, everybody, no matter what you do, right? It's very hard to, like, nobody is like completely. Some libertarians have these kind of pipe dreams where they believe that they can just like live fully alone, but nobody is ever fully alone. There was, even if, you know, by the time you turn 18, if you're speaking English, if you speak any language, right? You've already had kupuna, you've had elders, right? You've had people that have done work, malama, to help raise you. Not just your parents, but also the school that you went to, the kula, as we say in Hawaiian, the everyone around, right? That has collectively put together the work to make you who you are, right? The people who fed you, your mother, right? And father, or other non-binary parent that took care of you when you were defenseless, right? So this idea that we are separate individuals, right, is a very unusual and, I would argue, incorrect notion of what, you know, human beings are and what many creatures are, you know, many sentient beings in neo-feudal terms. But so when you work together in that Walmart, right, there, you know, in order to maintain you're working together, right? You're coming together, you're meeting, and you're working together. But when what to do with, like, you know, as Richard Wolff would say, what to produce, what to produce, how to produce it, what to do with the profits, who does what, you know, you're coming together and working, but then it's not a hui because people are not, you know, mutually respected. People are not mutually taken care of. Somebody is on the top, right? The boss, for example, or the owner, the shareholders, whatever it might be. And they're in the Walmart and they're telling you, well, I have this job because I have, I don't know, I am more qualified, I have better education, and I'm just the boss. It's not really there's not really a good reason for it. You know, it's not pono, which is not just in Hawaiian language. It is not right. Because to maintain that system, right, of, you know, keeping you coming back to the job to get just enough to survive, and sometimes not enough, sadly, in places like the United States, where 100 million people are food insecure, are on the edge of food insecurity, or are in threat of being homeless, right? So to keep that system going, it requires, you know, a capitalistic method of working together, and then what to do with the resources, right? Like the credit union we're talking about in the Chinese culture. It requires a lot of lying, right? It requires a lot of disinformation under I would argue feudal slavery, capitalism as economic structures. It requires a lot of not pononess to just to maintain that kind of structure, right? And then the more unequal it is, the more disinformation and the more lying and the more wrong is required. And so when we talk about like and this is what I try to do with a lot of streams, is I try to approach topics from like fresh and not usually approached angles, particularly in the English language, as I try to capture the stolen Hawaiian language that was taken from me and taken from my parents, and the stolen Hawaiian culture, but not just to recapture that, but also to recapture everything else that is also taken from the rest of the planet. And I would argue taken a lot of this indigenous knowledge, right, which is multi-tens of thousands of years old and is most of the planet when we really look at it, right? As I've talked with on the Indigenous History and Future panel on Luna Oi's channel, and as I've spoken about in a variety of panels, the AAPI panel, this history of human, what Western left would call mutual aid, cooperative, non-hierarchical, or minimally hierarchical, except where required and merited. This kind of like that history of humans working together, hooing together for shared collective prosperity I would argue has been stolen from Americans. It's been stolen from white, Taco Bell employees in Canada. It's been stolen from Thoughtslime. As a, I believe, Jewish white passing individual from working at a Tim Hortons in Toronto. This has been stolen. Like, this is very important. Like, history of it's not socialism in the way that is defined in modern, let's say, socialist parties across the world, or communist parties across the world. But the spirit and the spirit, the values, the principles that led towards, right, whether it's anarchist, socialist, anarchist, socialist, Marxist, Leninist, whatever variant, the spirit that led to those processes that have built through a lot of struggle under colonialism, under capitalism, whatever successes, union movements, whatever successes in the modern world come from this spirit that is throughout humanity, right? And so that's what I want to kind of talk about, is how, more specifically, what I mean when I talk about hui, and not just the word hui, but what comes around because words are not, they're not static dictionary definitions, right? Just resting alone in Wikipedia.com, or dictionary.com, or Mr. Webster's Endeavor. They are built through like the wealth of nations and sometimes inequitably distributed wealth for over centuries and millennia, built through nations, right? Like culture and language and nations themselves. The meanings of words are built through billions of people's usages, when they're spoken, when they're heard, when they're read, when people meet and talk about these things. Every time that word is used, the meaning is evolving and being built, and it is building a history, right? If you talk about dialectical materialism, dialectical understandings through history, the words cannot be understood in an ahistorical, present-centered context. And I argue often that that's a weapon of the capitalist is to sever the history, right? It's to cut off access to dialectical understanding, to cut off access to what the 3,500 year Chinese understanding. They have, multiple times the entire recorded, pandemic, numbers, the COVID, not the COVID, but the comets, the eons of strife and the eons of prosperity. They have this deep history, and Hawaiians also had a lot of this deep history, which we were severed from. The indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, the indigenous peoples like Lost Sioux, right? Brother Lost Sioux, a lot of those peoples that's what the residential schools were for, was to sever off this deep and wide history of billions of people across the earth, the majority, right, who are not part of this white colonial capitalist imperial domination-based sort of society, right? And so when you sever off that that historical understanding, it becomes impossible to do true, like what the modern English-speaking left would call dialectical materialism, right? And what that is, because that itself evolved from a history. And I highly recommend you watch Stolen Anarchy by Stolen Anarchy by Tale of Twin Rabbit, if you have not, because this is a very important video to show how it's another piece in a link of our shared history by Twin Rabbit that shows how how white Europeans who arrived in America actually observed the ways of the indigenous peoples of the Iroquois, right? The indigenous Sioux, Anishinaabe, all these other peoples, right? And then, wrote about the collectivism and what the Europeans interpreted as communist communal property ownership as separate, and not only that, but all spiritual ways, justice, right? Restorative justice as opposed to carceral, and all of these things, and which inspired Marx and Kropotkin. And so these are deep and wide and long histories, right? That we can't, if we want to truly do what is called dialectical materialism, if we truly want to do what is called historical analysis and arriving, not immediately, as Luna Oy would say, Vietnamese comrade, right, would say, jumping to conclusions, but like when you hear something new, you look at it, you observe, you don't immediately jump in an ahistorical way to judgment. You consider it, you think about it, but in order to do that, in order to think about it in a historical way from a variety of viewpoints, right? In order to consider things in a historical way from a variety of viewpoints, you need to have access to history, right? And I'm trying to be very diplomatic here. That's the new Silver Spook thing, is I have my diplomatic times, and I don't say things in the extremely what would we say, that raw way. But anyway, because we're trying to do a particular, educate a particular subsection. But anyways, like the United States, the reason why, and this ties into critical race theory, why is critical race theory, there's a panic over this, right? Why is the ACLU on fighting critical race theory? It's about a country reckoning with racism. Why have half of the states of the United States already like basically banned it, or are in the process of trying to ban it, right? I would argue that the reason why critical race theory is on the map, and which is banned in almost half the states, right? I read this article that it was Texas became the fifth. More than a dozen other states, and as far as I know, most of them are trying to. The reason why is because critical race theory is about analyzing the racialized capitalist and colonial history of the United States, right? So critical race theory is about bringing, I would argue, the first time truly to masses of people in what calls itself America. Critical race theory is about, this you see who is arguing against it, right? Is white capitalists, right? Is because critical race theory is about bringing for the first time the true history of the United States to masses of people, right? Which is based on racialized capitalism. It's based on slavery, and it's still based on slavery, right? And so the people who would like to continue to operate in a not pono, in a not right, in a not hui sense, right? Not working together for shared prosperity, right? But having many people work for a minority, a very small number of people's prosperity, right? In order for that process to continue under capitalism, under racialized capitalism, slavery, feudalism, now it's like, I argue personally, neo-feudal capitalism, neo-feudal, Yanis Varoufakis calls it techno-feudal post-capitalism, right? Where it is no longer about the means of production being owned by a minority of private property owners on factories, restaurants, and warehouses, having workers come in for this surplus labor value that is sold as Boeing 737s, Honda Civics, GM trucks, and McDonald's burgers, and then that surplus labor value being accumulated in private profit. But now it's a new, extremely warped, financialized version where you just print out multi-quadrillions of dollars, or not quite that yet, but trillions upon trillions of dollars, right, from central banks, and then you give it to a handful of, corporate and billionaire majority individuals headquartered in Wall Street. And so that process, but that process itself, right, and then there's a lot of variety of analysis of this MMT, etc., and criticizing the quantitative easing infinity. But anyway, we're not going to get lost in all those weeds. Part of the strategy, I would argue, is to hope that the masses of people get lost in the weeds of this mountain, this massive jungle of lies that they have just built, of just nonsense, right? And hoping that people, you see, if we only tweak the interest rate on this particular country's banking system, that will solve the problem. If we only got rid of some crony capitalists, right? And Elizabeth Warren or whoever comes in and removes them, or put under the consumer protection laws, we disallow particular selling of subprime mortgage loans, which are problematic. If we just abolish the police, even, that's like each one of these things, right? I'm not saying like the United States police, they definitely have incredible problems as the continued slave catchers, but each one of these, I would argue, band-aid solutions, right, to a deeper structural problem. And as you are attempting to attack just capitalism, or just neo-feudal post-capitalism, or just the banking system, that abolish the Fed, this and this and this, each one of these individual things, which individually may reduce harm and are not unimportant, but if we don't have the deep historical analysis, right, that is part of the strategy, right? It's like, by the time you figured out how to deal with slavery, and then we can put it in a history book, or by the time you figure out how to deal with that problem, well, we've already created, when you figured out how to deal with feudalism, we've already worked on to the next system. It's called capitalism, right? When you figured out how to deal with the racialized slavery capitalism, we're already on to the next one. It's called prison slavery capitalism, right? Which the United States has. That's who's putting out that's the disproportionately African people that are arrested for standing in front of a 7-Eleven while black. And the United States has run out of prison slaves to put out its climate change fires because it killed too many in San Quentin and other prisons, which is all the levels of wrong, that, right? But each time you think you're solving one of these individual problems, without the deep and long and wide, planet wide, like not limiting yourself to the United States, Canada, Europe, Western and English speaking, and I would argue even just Spanish, any European language, Spanish speaking countries as well. We need analysis from Central South America, of course, but you really have to like look also in Asia and like honestly look there. And I know I've been really harping on that a lot, but the reason why I do that is because there is a lot of success that goes far too unacknowledged, to the detriment in Asia in particular. Far too much success, particularly in COVID-19, particularly at the start. In East Asian countries, even the New York Times, even the Harvard, even the ruling class of the United States had to acknowledge finally, 8 months too late, that the East Asian approach was actually of early lockdowns, contact testing, tracing, social distancing, and shutting down businesses and prioritizing the masses, the collective, right? The shahui, which is a Chinese word that means society, prioritizing, all the people working together and all of their well-being over a tiny few individual plutocrats, feudal lords, slave masters, capitalists, profiteers, right? And a handful of countries as well, right? A handful of European majority, white, Christian, Western European even more, right? That's a minority of nations as well, ruling over the labor and the work and the lives of and the physical bodies in slavery and human trafficking of the rest of the world. So and so the lack of acknowledgement of that's why I kind of bring and I am also Asian as well. So when I'm speaking of Asian, I'm not this is not like an alien, like I'm not from, of course, China or Japan or Vietnam or Laos, etc. But I grew up in Hawaiian and Asian coexistent and co-synergistic culture in Kalihi Palama. This is where I'm from. It was always been majority Hawaiian, Filipino, Chinese. Hawaiian, Filipino, Chinese, Japanese. I had Vietnamese neighbors, 3 different Vietnamese neighbors. So these are, when Nuna talks, this is not like a foreign language. I heard this language, lemongrass tea, pho. We ate this all the time. So when I speak of like, I am of course native Hawaiian, and the country of Hawaii, as I have brought up on many streams, right, had full citizenship for Chinese, for African peoples when they were enslaved in the United States and were segregated in Canada, which was not the end of the Underground Railroad, and both Canada and the United States enslaved and chained up the Chinese to build their railroads, and again, right, not hooing together, but Shanghaiing. That word comes because of the colonialism of China in Shanghai, where white Western capitalists would drug people, put them on boats, and then they would wake up somewhere in the United States, forced to do hard labor, separated from their families, separated from their past, severed from their history, right? And so that is my history. This is not foreign history. And I would argue this is all of our history. We have to learn this. We cannot simply believe that we can solve a lot of these problems in our, particularly for Americans, but not just there, all over, right? Climate change, war and dangerous nuclear conflict, inequality, even the concentration camps at the borders of the United States, even the prison slavery system, the carceral state, Black Lives Matter. These things cannot be approached, I would argue, these things cannot be approached as, again, targeting them with band-aid solutions for that particular problem, because until we have this deep and long analysis, to be more frank, right, because of, for example, if China had the same amount of deaths as the United States, right, if China didn't hui together and they had the same ratio of per capita deaths from COVID-19, they would have 2.2 million. One way to look at that is that by doing the early lockdowns, the contact testing and tracing, building the hospitals that were needed because they were needed at that time, and today they have like 1 case per 100 million on the average day or less, and 0 community transmissions right now, and so they have so that saved 2.2 million. They only have like 4,000 or 5,000 deaths. The Chinese saved 2.2 million people, right? It's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is the 603,000 Americans that have died, right, because of mistakes of Trump, but not just Trump, of all the political elite, the business which is capitalist plutocratic elite, and I would argue much of the people, right, who them. Many of them are your family members who continue to refuse to take vaccines, who refuse to mask, and refuse to do what was needed. They refuse to hui, right? They refuse to work together for the shared prosperity collectively, for their own individual need to not be inconvenienced by wearing a mask, to their own individual want to go to the yoga class or their conservative Christian church or their liberal church or whatever it was that they need to do, go on their vacation, right? Their individual rational self-interests had primacy above the group, and that's part of it, right? But the failure to examine closely, and honestly, and not be misled by this racism, right? Of it's just an authoritarian regime. The Vietnamese are just. I had family members who said, "Oh, the Vietnamese they only had a good." they had a little bit, they had lockdowns, which are bad, but the only reason why they had low numbers is because they have authoritarian police just beating up and forcing everyone into their houses. Like this is part of the racism. This is part of the lack of dialectical. If you're a leftist, this is a lack of dialectical dialectical materialism, dialectical analysis. This is a lack of history. This is part of the reason why I would argue 600,000 people sadly died, to be brutally honest. 600,000 people were murdered by all of the many citizens and political and business of America collectively failed 600,000 people. And they died, more than died in World War II. That could have been saved. If they had not been severed off from their brothers and sisters in Asia, if they had not been, and some of this is intentional, right? You had New York Times, Washington Post, news media just blasting it, and they have been doing this for centuries, ultimately, and heating up the yellow peril and anti-Asian racism. And that some of that is that, but some of it, there needs to be some ownership, because I had left Marxist Leninists like professors who I said, look, let's listen to the Vietnamese. Let's listen to the Vietnamese. We have our friend Luna Oy who's talking about it, and refused to hear it. Even as a Marxist Leninist, having read all of the Marx, the Kropotkin, having had a PhD in Marxist Leninism, read the Fanon, even the a lot of the Black radical and South Central American, the Draining the Veins of Latin America, had read all of this, had studied this, had was giving talks about this, but still something was, and I'm not saying that that's all Western left or something, right? But that is a pattern that is severed off so many people, and you can see this if you look at Luna Oy's frustration on Twitter. And I would argue it's not like solely the fault of these people in America or Canada or Europe or Australia, New Zealand, but the English-speaking world. They have been intentionally severed from their indigenous planet because, in order to perpetuate colonialism, capitalism, the plutocracy, even within the white Euro capitalist nations, right? Some of them distributed a little more equally. Not. There's still inequality, even across Germany, even the best social democracies. They require the colonialism. Sweden requires the extraction of labor from Africa and Asia with not equal, not equitable relationships. Germany took 97% of Bolivia's lithium, and these countries that are often held up, where they have done better than the United States in terms of getting universal education, universal health care, getting basic needs provided, housing rates and such, they still require they still require lies, particularly internationally, foreign policy, right, to maintain, in the same way that a boss and a capitalist structure requires lies, right, to maintain that inequality, because it's not pono, because it's not right, it's not just, right? And the relationship between Germany and Namibia is not right, and it's not pono, and it's not just, and that's why that has to be maintained. And black people, African people, and Muslims are overrepresented in poverty and in prisons in Germany, as they are in France and most European countries. And that is the continued not pono, barbaristic, I would argue, tendency that needs to, and it's of a minority of people of the earth, let's be clear, like that's not everybody, and even within those countries, that is not like everybody is not just in it solely for their own personal profit and self-aggrandizement and crowns and everything else, right? And mansions and their third G5 aircraft and their private island, right? Not everybody is there, but some people can even be led to think that they're doing the right thing, but they're actually end up doing the wrong thing. Anyways, but we don't want to get lost in that weed. So kind of back to this concept of what is the hui. So when we talk about hui and shared collective prosperity, anyways, I might look at the chat later, but I kind of want to get through this. But anyway, thanks everybody for showing up in the chat. I see everybody's watching. So when we talk about the word hui, it is a word that is in, as I often bring up, Hawaiian. It is a word in Maori. It often means meeting and gathering. It is also a word in Vietnamese, and it's also a word in Chinese. And I'm sure there are other cultures. I have not investigated all of these, so I don't want to speak for anyone who has not. I did talk to another Maori individual in the stream to raise money for the the victims of the Canadian genocide against the indigenous peoples in Canada under the residential school system. And I did talk to another Maori individual. I'm just gonna take that off for now. Who did speak about what it means, and it does mean meeting, and they also said it can mean other things as well though, and it does mean working. It does mean working together. When you say let's hui together, sometimes it means to discuss and like what are we gonna do with the share. What are we gonna do? Like if you have a workers cooperative, right? And you're like, what are we gonna do now that we have worked and labored together, right, on this house, on this farm, on this fish pond, to make this anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-racist cyberpunk adventure game. Now that we have hui together, right? Or now that we've worked together, and you have a hui to discuss, right? What, how do we divvy this up? Who do we get? How do we distribute this, right? That is not what you do, right? In a capitalist business, you don't hui, right? You don't have a meeting, right? Sometimes it's like like Mondragon has the cooperative congress of tens of thousands of people that come together to collectively decide who will coordinate, right? And what will be the maximum differential between people, like between the lowest and the highest paid employee. The maximum is like between 5 and 8, and it depends on each cooperative. So that's a hui. It should be mentioned that the people who, if you don't know what Mondragon, you should look up Mondragon Cooperative Corporation in the Basque region of Spain. The Basque region of Spain, I recently discovered, is a very mountainous region. But what's even more important about the Basque region is that the Basque language is one of the oldest languages in the world, and it is not related to English, German, French, and it is very much its own language that is not connected to many of the other European and the Western European languages, and it is a kind of kipuka, as we would say. It is a spot of continued indigenous existence, I would argue, within Europe, which has sadly suffered a lot of imperial, colonial, barbarous history in that region, right? A lot of lies and disinformation and propagation had to be propagated, and I don't think it is a coincidence that Mondragon, which has about I think it was near 100,000, depending on how you count, total members of their non-capitalist cooperative that produces everything from BMW just-in-time manufacturing parts. It produces like advanced nanotechnology, diabetic machinery for medical applications. It produces has restaurants, they have grocery stores, they have cooperative university, they have cooperative in which the students make up I believe a third of the decision-making board of the university. If you work for an abusive university like the University of California system, which ex-Homeland Security officer of a war criminal, Gianna Napolitano, I believe is the head of, and was having the police break the legs of Anthropology 206 college professors at San Diego, UC Santa Cruz, and UC Berkeley. That is the University of California system, which also backed a multi-billion-dollar illegal project here on the sacred mountain, Mauna Kea, the pico of the world, as the Hawaiians would call it. It's a very sacred place for many peoples of the Pacific. And Gianna Napolitano, as the Homeland Security officer, ex-Homeland Security officer for one of the greatest representatives of not Pono ways of being, the United States and its empire in particular, its military industrial complex, its military intelligence industrial complex. And Gianna Napolitano, is a neo-feudal ruler in a certain sense of that university system, which is different from the indigenous Basques Mondragon Cooperative University, right? Imagine if the students and the faculty, disproportionate 50% of, before the pandemic, 50% of college professors in the United States were food insecure. It was worse after that, right? I just met my cousin who is a college professor and he had other friends. They came to the Big Island, and we had a meeting, and we talked about how it was in Hong Kong, and there are problems there for sure. There's not none. He had a friend that was doing studies on anthropology and dealing with climate change and cultural preservation in Kiribati, Marshall Islands, Palau, Satawal. These are the Pacific Islands, and in Hawaii. And it was working in Hong Kong, and which is also has a lot of inequality. Part of that is the history of being a literal British colony until very, 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 very recently. And that history of not Pono, not indigenous, not mutually respectful, not collective shared prosperity of Hong Kong is part of the reason why that has one of the highest levels of inequality and the homeless. I met one of my cousin's friends was there, and they said, my goodness, like it was so hard to live there. We have to move back. Well, they're going back to mainland China, where there's a much better situation than Hong Kong, which was interesting. And they're discussing like, yeah, there's many problems. We could afford like a even with two of us working, like 200 square feet, where basically the hallways, you have to walk sideways to get through them, and it's just incredible. You know, the micro apartment, you know, coffin style apartments in Neofeud too are based on that in Hong Kong, which is part of a colonial legacy. And so, anyways, I gotta move on from that one. But you know, and so you know, the university system itself, right, is not Pono. That's why they were backing the TMT telescope with the backing of the United States military and the police, largest mass mobilization in the history of Hawaii, the illegally occupied Hawaii, as I often bring up, by the not Pono Empire of the United States, the unjust empire. And Gianna Napolitano took millions of dollars of student funds that were supposed to be for paying professors who were striking, wildcat striking, at the same time as she and the university administrators who make $400,000, $500,000 salaries. Again, even the university system is not huing for collective shared prosperity. It is feudal. It is feudal, slave capitalistic, right? Which requires disinformation. They were lying to the students about where the funds were going. They were saying, "Oh, don't worry, it's going to go." The money was being taken to do an unjust project from Californian college students and professors to do a mega project against the indigenous prior and informed consent on Mauna Kea. And so that again, so this is kind of like, you know, I think this is one of the material major differences between the Basque, which again, right, have I forget, it was a father in that area who founded with, I think, 3 people in the mid 20th century, where there was very high poverty, there was very terrible economic prospects, people were out of work, and they said, we're going to build something new. We're gonna build a worker-owned cooperative. We're going to call it Mondragon, and this will help us. And they made appliances, microwaves, refrigerators in the beginning, and it built to 100,000 people working together with no CEO, with no Gates, you know, in Neofeud would be the Clinton Bushes, the Gates Waltons, and the multi-planetary conglomerate of the Koch Jobs and their military, literal floating military industrial complex, 5-mile wide, you know, giant floating Pentagon above a, you know, landfill / wildfire incinerated wasteland that used to be the Earth, right? There's no CEO, right? There's no 6- and 7-figure making administrator at the university, right? And I think that I don't think that it is purely there is something to the nature, not because you have to learn Basque in order to be a socialist. I don't believe that. You learn Hawaiian or Chinese or one of these, and English is just cancel every letter. I joked with my friend, another indigenous creator, Naftali Faulkner, the Maori creator of, which is indigenous to New Zealand, Pacific Islander of Umurangi generation, and I said the letter of U is canceled. The EU, the USA, you know, the AU, Australia. Oh my God, where he lives, you know, all these U's, they're all canceled. We could only use the letter V now. Vietnam, you know, Venezuela. Anyways, volcano that we are defeating the U.S. empire on. with multi-100,000 indigenous and anti-capitalist solidarity, I would argue, by blockading the access to their, $20 billion tourist industry on the H1, and also mass worker stoppages at the hotels and the Polynesian cultural appropriation industry called Waikiki. Anyways, so when you have a it just being reconnected to that history, that pre-barbarous, or what do you want to call it, that pre-barbarous or at scale unjust, not pono, right, hierarchical, if you want a stateless classes, moneyless society, a lot of these they were not necessarily stateless in classes. All these indigenous societies were not perfect, right? But they did not exist in such inequality and in such abuse with slavery, with such war, such strife, right? Part of the outcome of having a very unequal, unjust, not pono society is that the society begins to decay within, and wars, right? As dominational, which must be enforced through violence, dominational ways of being, dominational cultures, economics, and politics, which are all interrelated. We cannot simply analyze economics, I would argue, as well. It's part of all the cultural analysis I do on Falcon, Winter Soldier, Billionaire Philanthropist, Arms Dealer, Playboy, Captain Iron Man and Captain Star Spangled Underpants. Is the cultural and the political and the economic, these are not separate, and they aren't separate in Hawaiian, and in Chinese culture as well. These cannot be differentiated, and compartmentalized. That is another weapon of not pono, unjust culture, socio-political and economic structures, right? Is to break apart history, right? To temporarily dislocate us from each other, Kanaka Maoli from our Vietnamese and our Hue and our Han and other peoples across the world, but also to compartmentalize, ideologically compartmentalize in terms of field of study, right? Economics here, sociology here, politics there, and then we have family here, and a lot of what I talk about is speaking of all these things at the same time, because not to say that we can't have different fields of study and then specialization, but when we try to analyze and have problem solving, and how do we change these systems that are abusing us, right? Why is the planet incinerated? Why is there are 700,000 lightning strikes in Canada in a 15-hour period after 6-degree world record temperatures, basically heat death ray the entire Pacific Northwest and West Coast, causing what will be the greatest wildfire, I would argue, season ever, which is followed by which came after one of the worst last year, right? You can't deal with that by looking at just the moment. You have to look historically, and we have to look across the spectrum as well. So I would argue that's part of doing dialectical thinking, is not just looking at it in economic terms. We have to look at it in culture terms. We have to look at it in language terms as well. How are the ways that we speak about these things, right? How is the word, even saying the word private property, right? Property itself is a word that is steeped in the blood and the toil and the exploited labor of billions of people. That was what built that word. Property, under a feudal lord, under a capitalist restaurant, a giant fulfillment center owner, or otherwise. The land on which that is built, the intellectual property, is the perpetuation into the ideological and digital rights management realm of the physical, feudal, and capitalist horrific history of the word property and title itself, which comes from what? Entitlement for who? For a minority of oligarchs, feudal, slavery, capitalist, or otherwise. So all these words have to be. That's why I kind of like analyzed. It's important to like look into what the histories of these words, not to like just play semantics, but to recognize that that is part of the history of that culture that is built on, and the understandings of these words, right? The ways the words have been used, build and continue to build the meanings, and they can build. They can have new meanings, right? In the same way that, in a positive way, in a way that a word that had a negative meaning can be recuperated and captured. Like some words that were used to denigrate and in a bigoted way hurt a minority can be, recuperated by them, or reclaimed, as sometimes it's called. But also the Red Pill, which was a film that was very much about breaking out of not just ways. Like the Matrix itself is a kind of a metaphor for a Western capitalist structure, and Zion is filled with, a communistic, disproportionately non-global South peoples, right? Tank and Dozer, resisting, along with trans individuals and created by trans creators as well, resisting this abusive system of disinformation, literally with the wool pulled over your eyes. Reality, not even what you think, feel, see, touch, and taste, being a manufactured, right? Like universe-wide panopticon, a universe-wide Plato's cave, right? But I would argue that the Matrix itself is that severing off of America from true history, which critical race is trying to bring back. But there's the handful of people that rule you in America don't want you to see that, or in Johnny, anyways. So I could go off on science fictional digressions for a long time, so I won't do that. But that word red pill, right, was also recuperated to mean to be a flagship term for the alt-right, right-wing fascism, and the resurgence of racism. That a lot of it began in white Western nerd spaces. I spent a lot of time in these spaces, sadly. But that doesn't mean that's the end. But that doesn't mean that and that means that's what that means forever. I say sometimes I'm a dialectical semiotician. So these words, just because the language and the words have deep problematic historical meanings, it doesn't mean that. We just have to never say these words again, right? But it means we have to have a historical analysis of where these words come from, what they mean, how they have harmed people, and in order to really have ways to move forward, right? Not just the words, but the history of what was done under private property. What does the word civilization mean? What does the word civilization mean? I want to go quickly on this one because this is something very important. Another member who of the another individual who was on the stream to raise $40,000 with the Serfs and Thought Slime for, again, the survivors of Indigenous genocide by Canada at the residential schools. Another member was Agent NDN and brought up a very important point yesterday, which is we really need to have the discussion about the term genocide itself and how it is not that great or as neutral as people think. Just have a look here and at the opening statement from the definition adopted by the UN and see if you can spot the problem. So, Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. So this is from the United Nations, right? I'm going to skip some of this just in the interest of time. Having considered the declaration made by the General Assembly of the United Nations in its Resolution 96, dated 11 December 1946, that genocide is a crime under international law, contrary to the spirit and aims of the United Nations and condemned by the civilized world. Recognizing that all periods of history, genocide has inflicted great losses on humanity. Anyway, the important part here, of course, I would argue, is the civilized world condemns genocide, right? Canada is a member of the United Nations. The United States has committed and continues to commit genocide against countless peoples, including the Iraqis. Every place that it has gone and made war on. Wars of aggression are the highest crime under the United Nations. The United States has engaged in many of these at the same time. It currently is engaged in wars in Afghanistan. It is not done there. It is withdrawing a few troops, but it is lying about how many are actually there. And the non-military or subcontracted forces, Iraq, Syria, what it's doing in Africa, what it is doing in South Central America, what it has, the removal of the uteruses of Hispanic women in Georgia. This all constitutes genocide under the United Nations, right? And so when the United Nations itself says that the civilized world condemns genocide, right? It's already problematic because the so-called civilized world is constantly engaged in this genocide. It just chooses which one it wants to focus on. In this particular case, let's focus on, on what the Third Reich did, which is of course horrible. However, they are unjustly, right, not attending to their own and trying to hide these, as Canada has done for such a long time, and sometimes not even trying to hide them, right? They're just not listening to the victims. Anyways, and so that's already a huge problem about the way that genocide is even defined. And I would argue that the word civilized itself is a weaponized word to denote that which is not white, Christian, capitalist, Eurocentric, i.e. civilizing mission, which was used by the French and the British, right? To send out missionaries. The mission was to civilize those who were not deemed, advanced, evolved under social Darwinism. All these really disgusting, racist, colonial, fully sanctioned by the university system, the academic system, which we have to acknowledge as well. There's a history there is blood in every university, in every university in America, in England, Oxford and Cambridge, NYU. They all have blood on their hands. They have all been complicit, not just in the breaking of their striking, underpaid, starvation wage, living in their Toyota Corolla, San Francisco professors and Berkeley professors, right, who had the SWAT cops, literally break their wrists in 2019 for asking for just enough money to keep teaching for school. That itself is a atrocity. But the structure of colonialism, the justifications in anthropology, in sociology, right, that were accepted, the idea of the savage, the race science, right, the black people, the brown people as lesser, subhuman, and a whole litany, many PhDs and much tenure, much career was built in philosophy, in sociology, and political science, in every department in academia, to justify intellectually this horrible genocide and slavery and travesty, a visit upon billions of people, the majority of the planet, Africa, North, South, Central America, the Native American peoples, the Asian peoples. It's just this, and so these words and this intellectual history, this is intellectual malice, and that also has to be part of that material analysis as well, which I know today there are academics that are trying to do that important work, right? But that is in a conflict, of course, with the empires that continue to run them, and Canada, which continues to drill for oil for the Coastal GasLink pipeline under Indigenous land, with continued justifications and lies, right? And again, the pile and mountain of lies that must be propagated to maintain an unjust, not pono system. So, anyways, and so kind of going back to. And something I said today, just to kind of, and to go into Vietnam, Luna Oi, who does a lot of important education about the socialism in Vietnam, which has 40 times less malnutrition deaths than the United States, which has, 10 to 100 times less total homelessness. It's basically very little, except with exception of some cities, relative to the United States, with universal healthcare, $4 insulin, healthcare has gotten to people who need it. If you have a lot of money, you have to pay some. Similar to the Hawaiian style, Big Island, sliding scale, collective cooperative healthcare system that we have here, as opposed to the privatized American capitalist way of charging $70,000 when you get COVID-19, or $10,000 to go to take an ambulance and become bankrupt, which is one of the number one methods of money-based domination or economic domination through financialization of the medical structure for the benefit of a handful of people, right? Executives of a Kaiser Permanente that makes tens of millions a year. He's the highest paid executive in Hawaii. Very disgusting. Anyway, so Luna tries to do education about, again, what I would argue is the indigenous people of Vietnam, right? The word indigenous was first uttered by Sir Thomas Browne in the 1600s. The word indigenous itself, very problematic word. The word indigenous itself, not because indigenous people are a problem, but the word is built upon and within colonialism and abuse, genocide, slavery, and exploitation, right? The word indigenous was first uttered by Sir Thomas Browne in 1646, who stated, although in many parts thereof there be at present swarms of N-words, now he said something else, serving under the Spaniard, yet were they all transported from Africa, since the discovery of Columbus, and are not indigenous or proper natives of America. So the word indigenous comes from those people that we have deemed subhuman, enslaved, killed, slaughtered, committed genocide against, stolen land, stolen people. The only difference between an indigenous African and an indigenous person from America is where they are at the time that the colonizer is abusing them. So the African was stolen and brought to North America, and so that is not indigenous, right? It only means the people that we are abusing that are from the place that we're at right now. Also, the way that Mr. Browne referred to the African people as swarms, right? Indicating that they're insects. The language itself, the way that that's used to describe them, it has all of this horrible, subhumanizing connotations and implications and aspects. And every time that word was used, that's how. And so anyway, that's why I try. Not because there's something wrong with indigenous peoples. I want to be very clear about that. Or the word indigenous, you can't use it anymore. But we have to recognize that this is the history. Again, this is dialectical analysis. This is dialectical linguistics with a historical analysis of how this word came to exist. And what does that? So what does that inform? How does that inform us today? When we speak of indigenous peoples, it is said that 6%, right? By some, how many people of the world are indigenous, right? Let's use our Western capitalist imperialist platform, which is every surveillance capitalist, including the G word and Wikipedia, right? How many indigenous people are there today? 370 million of indigenous people, right? They say it's about 6%. However, are the African people that have never been, and also look at this, right? The first people, native people, autochthonous people, who native to a place which has been colonized and settled by another ethnic group, right? Okay, so under this definition of indigenous people, are the African of Namibia, the African peoples of Namibia, the Himba people, the Ethiopian people, are those peoples indigenous or are they not? Were they colonized? Was Africa colonized, or are we going to pretend like the Europeans just accidentally took multi-trillions of dollars and slaves out of that country? They were colonized. Okay, so again, this is part of the disinformation and lies that are required by a not Pono, a not just a not Hui system to continue by Europe, including Germany and Sweden, despite however nice their healthcare system is for the people that aren't dark skin. The lies and the disinformation for the unjust colonialism that continues to be pillaged through the WTO, the IMF, World Bank, and other methods, with the backing of the United States military industrial complex and its coups and its overthrows. The lies about the indigeneity of, I would argue, the African peoples must be perpetuated in Europe, must be perpetuated in America, of course, and by the United States. Because if they were to acknowledge the truth, which is that what? The African peoples, the Asian peoples, the Chinese peoples are an indigenous people, a point that I bring up often. They have been and were. The century of humiliation is not a century where accidentally multi-tens of trillions of dollars of tea, silk, porcelain, as well as the entire contents of the Summer Palace and countless Shanghai Chinese rail workers for Canada, the United States, West Coast, and Hawaiian dole and sugar plantations under white capitalists. That was not... and then there was a period in which we accidentally acquired all of this wealth. Wrong. No, this is a lie. The Chinese are indigenous people. The Vietnamese are indigenous people. Or you can deny that, and then you become that which is... Let's be unhistorical. Let's perpetuate lies for whose benefit? Why is that a problem? Right? You have to ask when you feel this thing like that can't be true, right? When a white person says racism's over, I don't know what you're talking about. That can't be true. Why do you feel the need, if you as a white person? Why do you? I would argue the reason why is there's an internal fear that I may lose some of the unjust hierarchy that I benefit from. You know, or I fear that I will lose some inside, you know, whiteness card, or if we get rid of, like, if America becomes more socialist, right? That's the temporarily embarrassed millionaire problem, which is that so many Americans, despite their, even white Americans, level of exploitation, right? They still want to hold on to that idea that they could become Bill Gates one day, right? They could become a billionaire. They could become a millionaire. They could just like have a nice American dream life with, you know, a 3-bedroom house, 1.5 kids, a bouncy castle, and a Thunderbird in front, or whatever. They think that they can still get that. And so when they lash out and say, no, critical race and Marxism, postmodern, you know, post-neo-modern Marxist cultural, whatever Jordan Peterson and whatever these clowns said, you know, postmodern neo-Marxism, that Marxism is bad because it's about giving handouts to lazy people, and racism is over and we don't need to do anything, the police are fine, is because there's internal desire to take part in the, you know, barbarous feudal slavery capitalist social, economic, and political complex that has continued for centuries, right? And so that's the revulsion, because it, you know, the other side is to say, okay, well, I mean, it doesn't mean that, okay, well, every time any black person dies, that definitely was like racism and slavery, and every time, you know, like that's just, you know, like when I stub my toe, that's not, oh my God, that was capitalism. But it does mean that we have to have like an honest, good faith listening to the peoples that have been harmed, an honest, good faith listening and conversation and discourse and a meeting about this, right? And that's part of it. But because without that, many people who suffer, even as they are white, you know, as even American Johnson, right, who had such poor health care, right, even as a white capitalist who himself admits, I had 10 employees under me who I was lying to about the total income and revenue of the capitalist company that I ran, and I feel terrible about that now as a diaspora American being educated by indigenous Vietnamese people in Vietnam, and you know, but he himself as a white man, and a non-binary now, but passed for much of the time as a white man, was hurt by that capitalist and also that racist structure, right, in the United States. And so again, when you are cut off in America from bringing it back, right, when you're cut off from this history of the Pacific Island indigeneity and history, right, the deep history of the Pacific Island peoples, indigenous peoples, the Chinese and the Asian indigenous peoples, the African indigenous peoples, right, who not Euro colonizer, right, does, and not to say that nobody did any hierarchical and oppressive and exploitative actions, right? But historically, that is not where the vast majority of this kind of abuse and barbarism came from. And they have resisted it, in a variety of ways. And so anyways, so to miss that history of how did the Chinese undo a century of humiliation, right? And this pillaging of their country. How did the African peoples, resist and continue to resist? How do the South Central American abused peoples in Bolivia, suffering under imperialist death squads in Colombia, and the history of Spanish conquistadors, right? Columbus, not being pono to those people, right? Not being just to those people for the benefit of a small number of people in Spain under their feudal colonial structure, right? How did that? And when you cut yourself off from that history, then you're really hurting yourself. In the same way that when you cut yourself off from, if you allow the ruling class of the United States, of Canada, the Five Eyes, the G7, these ongoing barbarous elements within your country, if you allow the United States through the New York Times, the blue check marks, and this disinformation system, right? As head of the CIA once said, William Casey, we'll know when the disinformation campaign of the CIA is complete, when everything that the American public believes is false. If you allow yourself to be disinformed, right? To be separated, to be cut off, because when you are disinformed, right, it's not simply that, well, now you're just, kind of dopey and just kind of bumbling American, but it's okay, I'm gonna have my cheeseburger. No, when you're cut off from that, you really are. It is harming you. It is harming you to be cut off and disinformed. And right now, you're being disinformed highly about Asia and China in particular, right? And not to say, you love everything that comes out of there, right? Out of my Asian ancestors' country and my Asian brothers and sisters' countries. No. But we have to ask, why are we being cut off? Why are all these stories of bioterror Wuhan, where a bioterror weapon from Chinese lab, Chinese out to take my lunch, Chinese stealing our technology, stealing our intellectual property, stealing our stuff, the Chinese could ask, the United States asked for $30 trillion in reparations. Donald Trump did from China. Chinese could ask for 100, if they, they won't do this, but they could ask for $100 trillion plus reparations from stolen Franklin Delano, Franklin Roosevelt's families, the Delano family, the Astor, the Poor's under Standard & Poor's, the Harvard endowment, the Princeton and Yale endowments, and the entirety of the vast majority of the oldest and richest money families and Ivy League university money needs to repatriate $100 trillion back to China. They're not gonna, and then the rest of Europe. Britain has much to give back in the stolen tea and silk and the marauding of France and the British of the Summer Palace, the Opium Wars. If they wanted to ask for all of the reparations, the Chinese could ask for a 10 times the ridiculous, nonsensical amount the United States asked for. But they don't. That's not the way that they operate, and that's not necessarily the way that they want to operate. Not to say that reparations are never part of a ho'oponopono, or to make right in Hawaiian. It's not part of a process of healing for our separated peoples in the planet and the oppressed peoples, right? However, that is part of the disinformation, that they owe us something. Without the 08-09 financial crisis, when not Pono, Goldman Sachs high frequency trading algorithm programmers collaborated with Lloyd Blankfein, Jamie Dimon, and the Ben Bernanke, and the credit rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, again, the scions of stolen Chinese tea, silk, covered in blood money. That's who Standard & Poor is. The person who was false stamping AAA ratings, gold, platinum, solid, never will default ratings on collateralized debt obligations of repackaged $7 an hour Applebee's waitress getting a no income, no jobs, no assets loan for a Florida McMansion, right? That entire scheme that led up to the collapse of capitalism in 08-09, right? The apotheosis, the pinnacle, the penultimate result, I would argue inevitable result of centuries of barbarism under feudalism, colonialism, slavery, and capitalism around the world, headquartered now in the United States in 0809, that exploded in the noughties, right? In this mass accumulation, and the collapse of global capitalism was saved by the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese people, who bought up billions upon billions and billions and billions of dollars and of the bad debt and shored up the system in order to not see the world fail. The entire Western world owes a huge debt to them for everything that did not unravel at that time. Because while yes, it is possible that capitalism could, if the Chinese just allowed the entire global capitalist structure, the rigging of LIBOR, the London fraud den, right, built on colonial stolen Chinese tea and silk and African plunder, right? If the Chinese had saw fit to allow that all to collapse for the G7-led hyper-financialized capitalism that blew up in that time, there may have been, maybe there would be a different world where people said, oh my God, we have to change because millions of people are dying and starving and strife is breaking out, and we cannot allow, capitalism is a horrific, destructive system. However, it would have resulted in millions, if not, who knows, billions of billions. Giannis is a Greek individual who believes deeply in the demos of the DM25, which is an important structure to, bring some Ho'oponopono to Europe, which is in need of it, and he can speak of that as he has suffered under the austerity and the lack of democracy in the EU under Wolfgang Schäuble and the German capitalist banking system. Anyways, but he points out that like billions of people would have suffered if it had rapidly collapsed in an uncontrolled way at that time. Potentially great massive wars could have broken out, but the Chinese don't ask for thanks. They don't say, hey, give us a Nobel Peace Prize. Obama didn't deserve that Nobel Peace Prize. The Chinese did, but not that the U.S. and the West would ever give them because they're based on disinformation. But it was a decision, a thankless decision, because it would have caused such great suffering, right? The interlocking, as Richard Wolff points out as well, as a left Marxist, as the preeminent or one of the lead Marxist economists, who has an Ivy League, who is a descendant of stolen Chinese blood money and opium war money at Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. I forget the 3 Ivy League institutions that he went to, and he attended these Ivy League multi-$10,000 per year institutions with Janet Yellen, the other central bank Federal Reserve head. But anyways, so as Richard Wolff points out, a Marxist economist from the West, he says, the global capitalism exploded, and it has been on life support for the last decade plus, and it could have just been dead. But the interlocking of the economies of the United States and China, and Europe and China, and the rest of the world and China, and all the international economies are interlinked, and everyone would have suffered. The Chinese would also have suffered, right? But it's arguable that the United States, which has no real manufacturing base, that Biden is attempting to shore up but failing because of the failed United States, because of the lack of pono in the political structure of the United States, that can't get through the $1 trillion without 90. And I argue this: even if Biden passed a $5 trillion infrastructure bill, 4.9 of that, the vast majority of it, would go straight into the hands of today's feudal, slavery, and capitalist oligarchs, because all those systems still exist, right? It would go straight into the hands of Wall Street private equity firm executives, which the last $6 trillion, right, that were printed last year, went straight to the private equity firms, right? Elon Musk made $100 billion plus, right? Did it go mostly to you? It didn't. Know. When you got that $3,000, even in the stimulus checks, most of that goes straight to the landlord, right? Which is continued feudalism, right? Or straight to the mortgage lord, right? The rent lord, the cancer rent lord at your hospital bill, right? Or your wife's chemotherapy bill. It went straight into the medical debt. It went straight into paying for your basic needs that the United States does not meet. And anyway, so that's just a whole nother can of worms. But the intermingling of these systems, I would argue that millions of Americans they're much worse, as bad as the 2008 to 2021 has been, and it has been terrible. I've experienced it myself. It could have been much worse if the Chinese had not stepped in and took the steps that they took. You know, it would have been much worse for people in the United States who have no manufacturing base. Their roads are crumbling. Their water infrastructure is disintegrating. And I bring that topic up often, so I won't harp on that too long. But we know, right? And you can feel it, right? I hope that people are not so in denial that they can't see the United States falling apart at the seams, where it has not enough prison labor slave firefighters. In a county that used to have 24, they only have 8. So they can't put out the wildfires that their climate change headquartered in the United States, with the military-industrial complex, the number one carbon emitter, and 70% of emissions coming from 100 capitalist corporations headquartered at Wall Street, cannot put out the fires caused by the climate change, and the lack of listening to indigenous people about controlled burns in California to limit the intensity and destructiveness of wildfires, right? The lack of hooing between America and its indigenous people is part of why the fires have been that intense. Even there were cattle companies, not cattle cooperatives, cattle like Texas cattle companies, California cattle companies, big agriculture companies that were throwing like a dozen ads a day. I was watching on YouTube like about a month ago, talking about how we need to listen to indigenous people to do controlled burns because they were in terror of losing their entire Californian. As problematic as these industries are, they for their own survival, like orange growing operations, cattle ranchers were just like, we have to follow the indigenous knowledge, otherwise there won't be any California left to raise cattle or oranges or anything else, right? And it was like, I was like, wow, but the problem is like when you hide your not Pono-ness, right, in order to perpetuate feudalism, slavery, capitalism for a long time, when your program is to have as what the CIA has also called the fire hose of disinformation, when you're busy debunking one lie, they've put out 1,000 more, right? And part of the problem is when you have so many lies out there, right, then the population, it's like the boy who cried wolf, right? But it's the CIA, it's the ruling class that cried wolf, right? It's like, now you want people to listen to indigenous people when you've told them they're backward, they're savage, don't listen to them, they don't exist, they're all dead. Like in Canada, they're not around anymore, and you've denigrated them with your cowboys and Indians, your John Wayne, your all of your drunken Indian, deadbeat Indian tropes and all this garbage, and now you want them to listen, right? Now you want the people who have survived for tens of thousands of years in ecological mutual respect and sustainability, in person to person mutual respect and sustainability. Now you want those people to be listened to by Californian liberals that are too busy, having their fourth COVID, episode while not wearing a mask and abusing their own family and workers at the juice cleanse that they own, or the conservative Christian, that believe even less in science and listen even less to indigenous people. Now you want the white capitalist Californian to listen to the indigenous people. Anyway, that's a major problem for the United States, which is why it will sadly continue to suffer. And I say, sometimes I can be pretty harsh about that, and I'll just tell you, like, what, you guys are gonna suffer so terribly, and it's kind of all y'all's fault, white racist capitalists. I'm sorry, man. But at the end of the day, I do feel bad for everybody who suffers. We have to. It would not be Hawaiian for me to judge, and we don't judge at the Silver Spook Hui. We don't judge. Ultimately, we get very frustrated, right, when people say wrong stuff. If a white capitalist person says some very wrong thing, I'm like, that's very frustrating. However, we still want those people. That's why we housed a underemployed, literally living in a car, homeless college professor very like pure white, like white as the snow that is all melted in Canada now, sadly. Very white person with a good degree, with a good family, still suffering and homeless as a college professor. And we said, we will house you because that's what Hawaiians do. The Kanaka Maoli under Kuleana Pono and Aloha Aina, we hui together, even with people that don't look like us, even people some that time. We have to be careful, but we will even help people that have historically abused us. And we don't judge, you know? Positive Synergy, before Positive Synergy was here at the Silver Spook Hui, that's who was there. It was somebody who was just in trouble. So again, we just to be clear that like when I say these things, it's not, you know, when I say those things this way, it's not because like I just want white people to suffer because I'm so pissed off that they were racist and stole my language and, you know, brutalized Hawaiian people. No, we just want equality. We want everyone to prosper together. We want the younger, as the Wet'suwet'en and other the Giremden and the other indigenous peoples. I've spoken to them specifically about this. They call the Europeans that arrived the younger races. Not to be condescending, but just because they have not gotten through periods, because there were periods of strife in China. There was the eons of strife, you know, to use a StarCraft Protoss term, but there were era of a lot of more. There was more strife at some points. However, they had figured out ways to coexist, and they had grown up from that. You know, that's some of those periods, right? And we say now that we don't want to revisit periods where we have feudal warlords or capitalist heads or slavers. We don't want to revisit these periods of inequality and ethnic and religious difference, you know, between the Han and the Hubei and the Kazakh and the Hui and the Uyghur and the Han and etc. We don't want to revisit that period. So this is how we're going to live together, right? And the indigenous people of North America, what's called North America, they had a similar method. They had the bowl and spoon rule, which means no weapons at the meetings, powwow. They weren't always called powwow, but when we meet together and we share and we break bread and we discuss, bowl and spoon, no fork, no knife. But part of that is it's not just literally don't bring a knife, but it's about like we meet in peace and we coexist and we don't fight because and we try to de-escalate always the tension, right? We don't jump to. We try to de-escalate as much as we can because that can and has resulted. Like this one time in 1,000 years, we had some bad battles break out, and that was very bad and destructive for our peoples, all of our peoples, all of the dozens of indigenous languages and different but related languages throughout Turtle Island, North America. That was very bad for us. That period of 50 years of that 1,000 was very bad. So we need to figure out ways. That's what it means when they say like we are the older race. Right, the older race as opposed to the younger race. The younger race is that which is like still like two 7-year-old boys, you know, fighting. Oh, that's my teddy bear. No, it's my teddy bear. That's my Minecraft. Get off the computer. I want to play Minecraft. I want to do microtransactions and take a bunch of dopamine hits from this AI that's making me fork over daddy's $600 rent money for this FIFA soccer, gold platinum, bend it like Beckham, microtransaction, right? That Jim Stephanie Sterling will get upset about, right? And you're going like, I'm gonna fight over the computer. I want to fight over that's what they mean by younger. It's not because like you're something bad or wrong. It's just like this way of not coexisting is like, it is not mature. It's not grown up. It's not really a way to say it that. It doesn't sound condescending, but that is a way that they think, the Wet'suwet'en think about the Europeans that have arrived. Anyways, this is something I'm relaying to you from one of my indigenous friends, and that in a certain sense, the Californian cattle company owners, right, in Orange, not enough, but them going, oh my goodness, right? The environmental scientists who have said we have to listen to indigenous peoples empirically by the numbers, by the evidence. I'm just gonna take that. The number of people that the number of the places in the Amazon and the important rainforests and ecological systemically and vitally important green and arborist areas like in the Amazon rainforest, those areas that have been preserved are the areas in which indigenous people have been given their rights and their control, their ability to practice their ways. That's where exactly the line of where it's been burnt and where it's not. Right, and they maintain they make up those indigenous peoples that live in those ways. They secure the vast majority, like 80+% of the world's biodiversity, which is very vital to the world's and the ecology's continued survival, right? And so that's at least some acknowledgement from some scientists and even from the capitalist Orange company in Orange County going, wow, we're going to need to listen to indigenous people more. Now, I don't know how sincere they are about that, but they're understanding that we, within our capitalist Western structures, we lack within the scope of possibility of political, economic, social, and cultural domains of possibility. We lack that which is required. Scientifically, we lack that which is required, particularly under a capitalist structure, to deal with our global collective struggles. That includes pandemic. Capitalism has shown itself, as Richard Wolff points out, to not be capable of dealing with pandemic, right? As it prioritized the profit of a handful of giant corporations and the current neo-feudal heads of these oligarchies, right? One of them was Mr. Bezos, right? He made up $80 billion plus. Musk made $100 billion, and everyone else, many people suffered. 600,000 people died, and hundreds of millions of people lost jobs, lost health care, lost their housing situation in the pandemic, right? It was a massive wealth transfer upward. And so, so to deal with those big collective problems, ideally, right, you would start to go, the United States, right? If Biden was really trying to be if he would really wanted to be not FDR, but just trying to move in the direction of reconciliation, right? And move in the direction of doing the right thing as opposed to heading down a path that's destructive for economically and the planet, militarily for international nuclear war, and the continued decline of American life expectancy, which is down by years at this point. It's down by, it dropped a year last year, but even before that it was declining, right? The decline of American across the spectrum, quality of life and wealth, right? For the masses of the people. If Biden was really serious about that, Biden would be saying, hey, China, not posturing and going, we got to get tougher, we got to compete, we got to make war, we got to, and just this doubling down on barbarous, young race, barbarous, childish lying, right? Stop doubling down on that and just be like, we need to really listen to China. What did they do right on the pandemic, right? We need to really learn, and then don't say like one nice thing, but then follow it up with a whole bunch of continuation of Trump's trade wars, which Biden continues, right? Hey, let's listen to these 5,000-year-old wise, as Voltaire once put it, the Chinese are the wisest race. Not that you don't have to give them just claps and kudos just for that, but I mean they have 4,000 years of continuous history, 3,500 of fully recorded history, but they're continuous people for thousands upon thousands of years. The United States has been in existence for it's very young itself, right? It's been in existence for 200 plus, a little over 200 years. This is like a blink in the eye, right? So have some respect for your elders. Filial piety. In Hawaii, we call it. You have to give aloha to the kupuna. This is another thing that comes with our Asian relatives, which we have descended from here in the Pacific. And we're related to. Aloha to the kupuna, but that includes aloha to the kupuna, those peoples that have existed and shown themselves to be capable and have expertise, right? Kahuna is a word that means like those who have expertise in the area lead in that area. In China, it's the Mandarin, which has evolved into the socialism with Chinese characteristics. And so we have to give respect to those people who have shown themselves to be capable of doing the job that they're not to give people respect for their inherited aristocratic privilege because of their birth, right? That was a phrase of Voltaire. Voltaire on China, he said, and I brought this up last stream, but I want to bring it up again. Voltaire said the Chinese were the wisest nation, which has shown what a natural religion intended to reduce to. Anyway, there's parts about religion because he had a very much a problem with the corruption and the hierarchy and the abuses and exploitation of the Catholic Church, right? And Voltaire said the Chinese were the wisest nation, a 4,000-year-old country, the antidote to the illusions of Western Christian historiography, or again, historiography, the way that we discuss and describe history, which is incorrect, has a lot of lies in it, and you can't do dialectical analysis without honesty about your history. And China, under Voltaire's words, still offers the best constitution, essai sur l'amour, which is, I'm not the best at speaking French, but their constitution, as opposed to the doctrines in Europe, right? They're the United States, later Thomas Jefferson, which he borrowed a lot from the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. But China had the best constitution, and it does not rest on the merit. Does it not rest on the merit? The meritocracy, right? Does it not rest on the merit of the Mandarins, which this commoner, Aouet, that was Voltaire's real name, an admirer of Louis XIV, opposes to birth. Now, I have to say I admire Louis XIV because he didn't want to get his head chopped off. But does it not rest on the merit, as opposed to the birth of Louis, right? The birth of the Bourbon kings, right? The monarchs of Britain under the Palace of Windsor, right? The birth of Elon as the inheritor of colonial capitalist emerald mine wealth, and then saying things like, people are paid in direct proportion to the difficulty of problems that they solve. That's the capitalism is pretending like we don't have hereditary privilege and aristocracy. In whiteness, well, you're kind of born with a particular melanin count. That's not fair. Also, under a capitalist structure, those who already had the vast quantities of wealth, and those people who were malicious enough to try to accumulate it, did not gain and acquire, right, through capital investment and the accumulation of profit based on that, right, private ownership. That was not merit, right? So Elon is wrong, right? Voltaire would say Elon Musk. If Voltaire came back, and Voltaire, this is just to point out, there were some people in Europe, that were honest. Again, there are some Europeans who tried to at least sometimes be honest about their indigenous Chinese relatives and not sever themselves from the history. They said, hey, Western Christian historiography is illusory, right? And also a poison, by saying, Voltaire, when he said that the Western Christian historiography, which maintained Christian feudalist dominance and exploitation of serfs, right? Jean Valjean, right? The lower class peoples who got 57 years of life for stealing a loaf of bread. Not unlike a black person in Oakland taking a pint of milk for a child and then getting 57 years putting out California's wildfires, or making Nike sneakers for 25 cents an hour in a for-profit prison, right? And so Voltaire was a European who's trying to be honest about what they saw in China, which was a wiser, very wise civilization. And now the problem was that the majority of the Europeans, Montesquieu, who was a baron, a feudal lord, right? The 1700s equivalent of what Elon Musk is today. Baron Montesquieu, who had a bigger platform as a feudal lord, and other people and members of that class, on top of with a barbarous rule by force and violence, right? Unjust hierarchy of inherited privilege, right? Montesquieu said, no, the Chinese are backwards, deceitful, degenerate, and wrong, and immoral, and depraved, and they're Oriental despotism. He basically said what is now become, they're an authoritarian regime of brainwashed CCP pawns, and despotism is the result of this terrible structure. And European feudalism is far greater. Christian, Western historiography is not illusory. But the illusions of Western Christian historiography are a poison to us. Right? That's what he said. And then it was met with denial. Kind of like Millennial and Gen Z. 50+% of people under the age of 35 now prefer socialism to capitalism, and they at minimum find very much wrong with capitalism, right? And Voltaire, who was a commoner, Arouet, right, said there is something deeply wrong with our disinformation, lie-based Western history. That's like the Millennial Gen Z saying, hey, we need to learn the critical race theory, which is the history of colonialism, racialized capitalism of the United States. Hey, this capitalist system and the lack of merit of Elon Musk, right? Who said things like the sun will turn super red giant in 500 million years being off by a factor of 10. So that's just wrong on cosmology. On space science and astronomy. I almost said astrology, not astrology, but in a field in which he's supposed to be an expert, space colonization, who said things like COVID-19 will be near 0 cases in April 2020. That's just incredibly wrong. It's like right? And he says these things, and people follow him and lead as though he's some kind of expert in these things, but he has no real merit in many of the things that he claims to have merit, right? Unlike a Mandarin in China, right? A meritocracy, and today a member of the top 7 tiers of the Chinese Communist Party, who makes sure that 850 million people get alleviated from poverty, right? And so what the masses of people, I would argue, particularly younger generation, not exclusively, and Richard Wolff is saying is, hey, the inherited privilege of a feudalist, a white person, why do you get special privileges under whiteness, right? And don't pretend like racism is gone. If it was gone, why are black families on average 10 times poorer than white? Donald Trump, did you not watch what happened? Of course it's not gone, right? But this is the denial, right? And so when Voltaire, and so people are saying, hey, let's stop having an illusory history. It's called an American public school textbook or private or charter school textbook that says Thomas Jefferson was the greatest person that ever lived and created the Constitution, not plagiarized it, and that America is a free, greatest nation on earth with freedom, equality, democracy, despite all the lies and the fact Thomas Jefferson was a 260 slave-owning child rapist, and despite talking about freedom and justice and equality, lived a freedom as an oppressor, not justly, and so many people were unfree under him, and there wasn't equality, and there never was in the United States, right? And that's a lie. That's, as Voltaire would say, that is illusory. That's a lie, and that's a poison to us. It's a poison to our peoples of Europe. As to young people and people, Black Lives Matter and anti-capitalists are saying, this false history that you give our children not poison history. Give us dialect, give us the true history of the United States, right? Don't give us illusory Western Christian historiography, right? Give us the true history, because without that you poison our children, right? As Ho Chi Minh would say. As Comrade Ho Chi Minh would say, to have socialism, we must create, and we must have socialist people. And what does that mean? That means, to me, and I think there's more in that quote. It goes into, that means raising people. That means education, right? That means like teaching. That means the ike, the giving the knowledge, right? That's a Hawaiian word that means knowledge. In the kula, which is the school. Giving in the way that we just, even from parent to child, but also in the school system. When you give illusory history, right, you wind up with a poison, right? And again, so that's I just trying to make it. So I'm not saying this stuff because I just don't like white people and I don't like Europeans and something. No, this is a long and deep problem that has to be analyzed. And the reason why I jump through history in this way is because this has to be analyzed. To get to these solutions, I believe personally, it cannot be analyzed simply by looking at, okay, where are the capital flows right now in the United States? How can we make a better, it's important to make memes, and I don't want to criticize anybody who does that, or anybody who makes any videos and does whatever part of the diversity of tactics that we require to change these structures, right? But simply going, well, what we need is to just get to Marxist-Leninism or whatever, Trotskyism, socialism, anarchism, Posadism, and whatever, we have to just get to this place, and this is the solution. This is how we get there, and we need to analyze the economics, and just class, or just, I don't know, to compartmentalize and limit it, and not have it in the historical context, causes us to become myopic, right, through time and across geographical space, right? And then we're not going to get to the right solution. I would argue, the success of the Chinese Communist Party, which has celebrated its 100th year. And I'm sorry, I've kind of gone off the topic, but to bring it back to that, they have celebrated. They are the greatest success by the numbers. And as John Ross, who is he's white, and he's I believe from Europe or the West. I'm not sure exactly where he is. But he's one person who is saying we have to acknowledge the greatest success in the history of the human species is in fact what has been achieved in China in the last, like 100 years. It is the greatest alleviation of poverty. If you add up the people who have risen in status to a middle income, a middle prosperity in Europe, in America, in Canada, across the world, and many of them still haven't gotten there. If you add up all people that have been brought out of poverty, it's not even close when it comes to what this one place has done. On top of many other achievements, on top of leading the world in regreening and in renewable energy, right? On top of leading the world in supporting many other colonized peoples in decolonization. There's a host of other successes. Every conversation has to start and begin, as we speak about what Voltaire called the wisest nation. And it's not something hereditary to them, it's not like something in their DNA. That's eugenicist and that's more racist lies, right? It is practices, it's cultural dialectics that goes way back. As George Yule, who studied, and it was a diplomat between East and West, between the United States along with Kishore Mahbubani, who wrote Has China Won, an important book as well, for Westerners who want to understand, who has gone between Nixon, Deng Xiaoping, who's gone between, Clinton and the Chinese, who's gone between, today even, Biden, not the individual, but the country to country, right, relations. And Europe to China, Europe to United States has seen how these operate. Singapore in some way has, of course, like everywhere else, has a lot of problems, but similar to Hawaii in the sense that it was a very small country had to have a very high level of education and diplomatic skill and education in order to survive, because they're a very small place. Switzerland was another one of these. Anyways, but and John Ross is another person who has spoken about this. In order to understand, right, we have to begin with the conversation, not with China stole lots of technology from us, not with is there a genocide here and there that we have flimsy evidence on, while Canada has like fully evidenced multi-thousand children's body genocide that is incredibly destructive and horrific to the Canadian people. As many of them, even in academic circles, right? Somebody said, I'm at a university, and across the university system, I'm seeing university professors of anthropology denying and saying residential schools did a lot of good. Actually, this is, again, that is the poison, that is the poison in the Canadian 21st century academic system. That is the modern, what Voltaire called Western Christian, not Christian specifically, but the Western historiography. The illusion that ultimately poisons all white Canadians as well, because you're sitting on, you can never really heal till you have approached your past and your wrongs with honesty and with humility, and with you want real reconciliation, not just hashtag reconciliation with Justin Trudeau hugging a handful, in his blackface, not in his blackface, but showing up with a bunch of indigenous people, drinking some of their traditional tea, giving them a hug, taking a picture, and calling that now we're reconciled, while he's suing with $100 million of Canadian taxpayer money, the families of murdered indigenous residential school children. That's what he's doing, right? That's the illusory Western historiography. That's poison, Anyway, so I've gone off on that topic long enough. So when we talk about to get back to it's 1 o'clock. I gotta get off very soon. I've been talking a long time off the topic. So to bring it back, shahui, right, is a word that means, and I've been studying more. I'm trying to read up more on the Chinese history, as it relates to Hawaiian history, as it relates to Vietnamese history, Chinese language. And my pronunciation is probably off. So I'm trying to learn like the long tone and then the dip tone. I remember E. American Johnson was trying to practice the long tone, the dip tone, the drop tone, and the rising tone and the flat tone. Like ma is mother in Chinese, and then ma is horse, I think. I might be mistaken. One of them is mother, one of them is horse. So don't make sure you say the long tone. Okay, so don't speak with a vocoder cyberpunk robot voice in Chinese, because you may misinterpret horse for mother. Now, they say actually it's very rare to accidentally insult someone in Chinese, but ma is mother, right? And then ma is another thing. Ma, and then ma is the drop tone, and then a short drop tone, and then the ma, just like no intonation. There's actually 5 ways to pronounce a Chinese word. I just recently found this out. Anyway, random linguistic phonemes aside, when you have the Chinese word, just some background on this. I was like studying this. The word for society, shahui. That's what that word on the top right is. Shahui. Sha is like pronounced, not she. It's like sha. It's not. It's kind of like the, but with that's the way that vowel is pronounced. Shahui is and hui is not. It's like hui. It's very fast. Almost like HWI, but not quite. Shahui is a society in Chinese. Like and just to bring back to the word hui, right? Crap. Okay. God damn it! I'm trying to get the word. No, not the Hui people. I should have Googled all this before I started. Let me see if I can get it. Oh, here it is. Okay, Sha Hui. Yeah. So, the word Sha, the word Hui is where is the first part of it? Because each of these are ideograms, right? I did take Japanese as well when I was in college and also in school, in grade school. Okay, I don't want to see this. Close. Okay. Sha is group, society, collective. Group or society. And hui. This is the word hui is the same word in Hawaiian. That's what I often bring up. And hui is meeting, right? It means the same thing in Maori. To have the ability to be good at, to have the ability to be good at, can, could, meeting, right? And so shahui is all the people coming together, right? Hui often means like a verb, like coming together, meeting. As I said, to hui together is to be in a worker-owned co-op. Let me find my little thread here with Adam Kiawe, because this will give a better description of what I'm talking about. So in Hawaii, hui meant worker-owned cooperatives historically. With my friend Adam Kiawe, who has the information on this one. Yeah, here, this one. I know I've gone through how Hawaii was more technologically, politically, and socially advanced. If you want to read that, you can go through this whole thread. But specifically on the difference between Western white capitalist Dole pineapple plantation, right, and the sugar plantations, the Hawaiian hui were a threat to this one. Yeah. Example of equality, democracy, existing socialism in Hawaii, without racial hatred, greater technological advancement, because Hawaii had, as I often bring up, electric lights before the White House, things that you may not know. But the main thing is that I want to get to in this particular, this is actually an image of Kalakaua, who was one of our leaders, right? Kalakaua was, for Chinese, it would be like a Mandarin, right? In technological advancement as well as political leadership. He invented a torpedo-proof boat and also a submarine. This is a picture of the actual submarine here in the bottom left. This is a subaquatic vehicle that was later built. It was designed while Jules Verne was still imagining 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So when I say Hawaii was like a living Wakanda, in the sense it was more technologically advanced and economically advanced. But even more than Wakanda, also was internationally working with other parts of the world, and gave full citizenship to Chinese and African peoples, as I said before. So that Hawaii was even more advanced than Wakanda in that sense. Now Wakanda was probably right to worry about what the rest of the world would do if they found out they had resources. I mean, the Congo, Libya, all these places have found out what the West does when an African country has resources that it wants, right? We know what happens. It's terrible, terrible things. But anyways, but the point here is that Asian and particularly Chinese were a threat to the white, Holly's white oligarchy or a foreigner, right? Threat to the white oligarchy because of the Hui system, right? Whereby, and I recommend, if you don't know Adam Kiabe, follow Adam Kiabe for Hawaiian history. He's a Hawaiian Filipino historian. I've learned a lot from Adam because the Hui system, right, whereby the Hawaiian cooperatives, right, Hui were basically co-ops, right? They avoided white banks and businesses, right? Chinese specifically also married into Hawaiian families, hence the names like Akana, Akau, etc. So, and I would argue, right, the word has come to, it doesn't mean exactly the same as what it meant in Chinese, but to come together, right, to work together, right, for the collective prosperity, right, to bring it back to the title of the stream, to come together for the shared collective prosperity of the society, of the people, right? The society, and then Hui, the meeting, the coming together and working together. This is why the Chinese and the Hawaiians work together in this way, right? Just as an example, the Chinese did not ban the Hawaiian language. The Chinese didn't enslave the Hawaiians and make them toil terribly and in an exploitative way in the Chinese rice farm, right? The Hawaiian did not chain up the Chinese and say, Chinese, you will build our Hawaiian hale, our house. You Chinese, you will build our rock wall, our fish pond, our ahupua'a system of sustainable ecological taro cultivation, horticulture, and regenerative agriculture and fish raising. Chinese, you will build the fish pond. Chinese, you will do the planting of the kalo and the harvesting. For a handful of Hawaiians, right? Not all white people in the whites that came to Hawaii benefited as much. There were the Dole, that's why it's Dole, his personal plantation, right? And his family, his dynasty, right? He's the modern Montesquieu, right? So the Hawaiians did not operate in this way. And they say, Chinese, you will do this way. For a handful of Hawaiians, you will work and toil terribly for our benefit, right? And the Chinese didn't do that. The Chinese and the Hawaiians had similar ways of organizing labor and what to do, what to produce, how to produce, what to do with profits, right? It was called the Hui system, right? And this is why there were many marriages between my family. Also, we have intermarriage in both sides of my family, Chinese and Hawaiians that were intermarried early on. You know, now as the colonial era and the illegal occupation, things got worse for Hawaiians. It was a century of humiliation for us, like the century of humiliation for the Chinese, which is part of why Hong Kong and Honolulu's inequality, which is some of the highest on the planet, it is $1 million, 1.2 million on Maui, and $1 million for the average 2-bedroom house in Oahu. Not even in a nice area. This is why we were homeless in Oahu. And in Hong Kong, where Western white capitalism and colonialism took great hold. Hong Kong, a colony of Britain, right? Some of the most unequal parts of the world there. You have a lot of wealth, and then you have a lot of very expensive tiny coffin apartments, right? Coffin apartments. They're like literally 5x7 pieces of wood, right? And so to me, this is a shared history of the Hawaiian and Chinese colonial era. Like, I, who grew up in a ghetto, right? What Neofeud is about is, as a Hawaiian and Asian person, is part of that shared history of colonization. And the shared history of the Hui is part of our shared cooperative working together. And that's why we got along that way, right? And avoided. The reason why we avoid the bank itself, right, is because Hui, Hui credit union, Chinese, let's see, informal loan club, right? And so, because part of that is because the accumulation of wealth, right, from the business, right, into the bank. The banking system is like, okay, now that we've accumulated this wealth, how do we utilize this wealth to engage in new projects, right? And so the informal loan club of a Hui system, right, is a rotating savings and credit scheme popular among many immigrant and migrant communities, right? So even in diaspora Chinese in the United States, right? Biao Hui, is when you engage in participating in the hui, right? So it's basically like is a group of close friends and family come together once a month, contributed to a fixed amount of money into a money pool, and one group will be chosen to withdraw a lump sum from the pool for purposes of down payments towards houses or cars to start new businesses. So again, this is collective, cooperative, non-capitalist, right? Or minimally, as we can manage under the current non-stateless, non-classless, non-moneyless society that we live in. This is a Asian method of sharing the accumulated resources for future endeavors, right? Whether that's to get a down payment for a house, to start new business, right? So that's part of that cooperative banking structure, right? Not dissimilar to the Mondragon, as again, indigenous Basque people of Spain. Caja Laboral is under Mondragon. The bank, right, is let me see, banking. Is Mondragon, which is the Mondragon Corporation, which is the cooperative federation, right, of non-capitalist cooperatives, where you have a democracy of masses of the working class. The worker owners decide what to produce, how to produce, and the maximum differential between, right? They decide who is the CEO, and how much the CEO gets paid, and they hire and fire the CEO, right? Imagine if Elon Musk was hired and fired by his Tesla workers, right? That he has the cops break the legs of when they strike. Imagine if Walmart, the Waltons, had the Walmart workers decide how much the Waltons can make and keep, and how much, and who gets to be head of the Walmart company, right? Do you think they would put in place these dynastic old rich white people who have abused them terribly with cop busting, firing all the elderly people and disabled people, which they do at all big capitalist corporations? This is something they engage in, paying them terrible wages, relying on food stamps to supplement their terrible wages. Do you think that the hundreds of thousands of Walmart employees would when they became worker owners, would they continue to hire? Would they keep the Waltons? Would they fire, or would they keep on as their coordinators, the Waltons? I think that they would get rid of them and decrease the million times salary or revenue that goes to the Waltons compared to their wages, right? It'd be closer to Mondragon. The head of the cooperative gets about 4.5, I believe. At the moment, it's 4.5. So the CEO of Mondragon gets 4.5 what the average or lowest paid worker owner gets, which is what it should be, right? This would eliminate many problems. Anyways, so but this is not just the Basque peoples. This is also the Chinese system. And it is not only the diaspora. This is a way that things have been done. Not always, right? But this is a way of huiing together. That's why it's called a hui, right? Of banking, and then of in a corporation, right, working together in a business, working together and deciding what to produce just internally in terms of the produce from that farm, that restaurant. I don't know, that Huawei, which is a hui. Huawei is a cooperative, right? Let me see. Where's Huawei? Yeah, Huawei is owned. Can we get the actual? There's a bunch of bullshit about. I want their actual site, not the Western media's bullshit. Huawei is less than 1% is owned by the founder, Ren Zhengfei. Canada, right? The Western, the poisonous Western historiography filled, right? The disinformation filled Canadian country, as part of the United States imperial complex of capitalism, has kidnapped the CFO of Huawei and continues to hold her hostage. And they're currently fighting a court battle, which is ongoing. But that is part of the lack of. That's part of the lack of dialectical nature and the lack of history, true history, that Canada has, right? And they also don't talk about what they're doing to their own citizens, right? What they're doing to the one of the coordinators of one of the largest, I would argue, I believe it's the largest cooperative in the world, possibly. I could be wrong, however. 170 plus countries, 100% owned by employees. Okay, so I don't know if can you read this? This is one reason why the United States and the West kidnapped the CFO, which is they have done to Japanese executives in the Yellow Peril, cyberpunk 80s era attempt to destroy Asian businesses there. Okay, when Japan was rising, the United States has done this even to European friends. They kidnap French business executives for tech companies that the United States saw as too close in competition with American full spectrum corporate and economic and hegemonic dominance. Even their own French companies had their members kidnapped in France, just kowtowed to the greater empire. So this is, I would call the inter-neo-feudal fight. But anyways, but one major reason why they had to kidnap, they continue to have these sanctions and attacks on Huawei is because Huawei, right, does not distribute the revenue and the fruits of the labor of the technicians, artificial intelligence specialists, 5G engineers, the scientists working on next generation Internet of Things technology, the accountants, the manufacturers of the phones, the installers of the power lines, the connectivity managers, all the people that work at Huawei, even the janitors. Everyone has ownership like Mondragon. And this is a threat. Why? Because this interrupts what Voltaire criticized and what Montesquieu fought for, right? Which is inherited. Musk, today it's Musk instead of Montesquieu, or the Queen of England at that time. But today it is Musk, it is Gates, it is Walton, it is Bush, it is these CEOs of the major corporations who take Elon Musk makes 2.5 Jeff Bezos makes 2.5 million, last year made 3 million times the Amazon fulfillment center workers revenue, right? Most of it, of course, not in salary, most of it come through bonus and accumulation of profit based on having more already capital, that's the throne of $100 bills and Ben Franklin stacked to the height of a stadium on which modern Western barbarous oligarchs sit instead of feudal dynastic chairs and built on the blood of colonial extraction. They're all colonial. It's all colonial. But anyways, but that is a threat to Musk. This is a threat to the modern day feudal rulers. Huawei, on top of it being China, it is a threat as well because of its structures and ways of not trying to be more mutual, not perfect, but again, trying to be more mutually respectful. It's person to person, racially, ethnically, and also economically from nation to nation, right? Getting hundreds of millions of vaccines out to people who needed it early, not waiting, right? And letting people die like the United States did and Britain did, right? And Europe even still refused to give a lot of vaccines to certain countries, selling it to the high-priced, overpriced, wealthier countries. And on top of giving forgiven loans, multi-billions to Cuba, as Fidel Castro said, Comrade Xi Jinping is a great friend of mine personally, and China is China is a symbol of and a model and a hope for the global South and the Third World under colonialism. As Evo Morales come out and said as well, we are thankful for the multilateralism and the respectful and economic work that we have achieved with the support of our friends in China. That's Evo Morales under United States Elon Musk backed fascist coup for the lithium that I talk about a lot as well, so I won't harp on that too long. But I want to bring up that Huawei is also a Hui. It is a technologically advanced indigenous civilizations worker-owned cooperative, 100% employee-owned, right? What are the biggest entities in the United States? Are there any very large tech companies worker-owned in the United States? Not yet. Not yet. If the United States recaptures if the United States unsevers its connection to its indigenous and dialectical history and present, right? And I'm using these words in a complex way, but I'm trying to rearrange parts of your English-speaking mind. If the United States can reconnect itself through critical race theory, through economic analysis, Marxian analysis, socialist analysis, anarchist analysis, as well as listening to people of color, LGBTQ plus community that have suffered terribly under these structures, which did not under the Hawaiian culture, who had full acceptance of LGBTQ plus and non-gendered terms for parent, and also stand up like a man is again kukanaka, stand up like a human. And we have to listen to all those people and all of their historiography, right? Their non-poisoned historiography, right? And then also apply that in real time. And then, hopefully we'll have the majority of United States large organizations of people working together as hui. Or you can call it worker-owned cooperative, but there will be the largest fulfillment centers in the United States, not run for the benefit of a handful of modern oligarchs, right? The largest centers distributing goods like Walmart, not run for a handful of feudal, slave master, colonial, or capitalist oligarchs, right? But run as a hui, run as a worker cooperative, right? It can happen, it must happen. And this is why the United States ruling class wishes to remove critical race theory, doesn't want to teach the true history of the United States, wants to keep you separate from what China is actually doing, right? Because it does show an example, even to the United States, right? 600,000 people were killed by the United States ruling class to separate you from your brothers and sisters in Asia. And that could have been saved if people had listened, right? And not just dismissed it as authoritarian regime, not just dismissed it as the Chinese were just dirty. The Chinese just got lucky. It's all fake. It's all Wuhan flu. It's just a little cold. If the majority of people in the United States had listened, right? To, not the wisest, just a wise people, right? Many people would have lived. Many people would not have been in threat of homelessness, because that's one of the impacts. The economic impacts cannot be avoided, right? It's like it was literally shooting Donald Trump and the West in the United States, because Europe had terrible economic, right? You are shooting yourself in terms of human life, in terms of a housing crisis, in terms of just economics, right? You had a negative 30%. You are economically as a whole shooting yourself in the foot while privileging again that oligarchy, right? And all the jobs lost, right? We cannot forget. Do not allow the ahistorical, right? Again, I'm using a European term. Do not allow the unwise. Ahistorical Western history, right? What they want to do now is erase the entire 600,000 deaths. They want to erase 2020 and just pretend like it just didn't happen, right? That is going to be part of this. It's going to be because it's a horrible stain, because it shows up the entire Western world who all had catastrophic worst cases and capitalism. We must maintain that, because that is part of the poison. Again, right? That's part of what Voltaire called the poison of the ahistorical Western barbarous world, right? So, not to say we have to just like, oh my God, just think about all the dead people all the time, but don't allow them to erase that. We have to remember this, it was capitalism, it was capitalist countries, it was refusal, it was racism, it was anti-Asian racism, but not only that, and it was selfishness, it was the individualism, which is part of a disconnected. Part of becoming a rational, self-interested individual is severing yourself from your fellow people. As my friend Positive Synergy would say, everything, right? All people. Right? If you separate everything, it's every and thing, and making everything about things and cutting yourself off from everyone else, right? Saying it's all about me in this time, right now, right? It's ahistorical, it's ageographical, it's not global, it's not even local. It's just me right now. Even there's people in my office. I'm rat racing to become VP marketing and then CEO, because I'm a temporary embarrassed millionaire. That is part of the ongoing ahistoricity and the ongoing Western Christian historiography that is poisonous. That is what some people said. The United States and Western countries had hundreds of thousands of deaths because of one of the COVID-19 virus was bad enough, right? But the real worst virus was the virus of this individualism, this capitalism. That brain virus was really what did the worst damage. COVID-19 can be dealt with. This is what Vietnam and China and even a lot of African countries showed, right? But what really did the killing was this privileging of individualism and of individual pursuit and greed, and people's belief in that, and the successful pursuit of that by its billionaires that own the plutocratic, bought and paid for Washington D.C. political system, right? And so anyway, so I think I've gone off about that. Not enough. So anyway, who eat together to do pandemic, right? Even with all the vaccines, America is still having rising cases now. They have to ask and bribe Americans to get vaccines. Part of that is the ascientificness of saying, well, it's just a little flu. The anti-vax ascientificness, that is part of the Western ahistorical poison, because why do people even believe that? Because some people could benefit from, the climate denial was at the disinformation of climate denial and the fossil fuels being causing climate change was a handful of who, right? The ruling class, Neofeudal oligarchs, they're called the Kochs, and the fossil industry, blasting a fire hose of disinformation specifically on climate change so that they could continue to plunder and burn their dirty fuel that's burning all of California and will incinerate America, sadly, and much of the rest of the earth, sadly, right? And that's part of the poisonous Western Christian, because a lot of them were neocon, right-wing Republicans that were blasting the 99% of scientists agree, but one disagrees, and so that means that we can still burn fossil fuels. It's all up in the air. Who knows? Who cares? Right? Poisonous Western ahistorical and ascientific information, right? And then the lack of respect for science, then, right? Which the United States has a lot of people that disbelieve in medical science, disbelieve in climate science, and that lack of respect and not just lack of history, right? But also lack of just basic scientific fluency means you can't deal with climate change, you can't deal with pandemic as another level of this problem. And anyway, so I'm not going to belabor that one anymore. I'm going to take this off. It is now 1:31. Okay, I got to really get to it. So I hope that I've kind of talked about, how Hui relates to the Hawaiian culture, how it relates to the Asian culture, how it can relate to American and Canadian and other Western peoples, and you don't have to use that word. Worker cooperative is just as fine a word, right? A lot of left, are now, the serfs. I was just on a stream with them to raise 40,000, to raise money for the residential school survivors under Canada's genocide, and the serfs talk about it. I know Mr. Wolf does. A lot of circles are talking about, even some people with more liberal and conservative brainworms are bringing up, wow, maybe we need to not have a handful of billionaires making all the money, right? And that's important. That is good. That is important that work continues to be done, right? To educate people who need to learn, right? And also, as Twin Rabbit would say, let's also give credit where the credit is due and be fully dialectical about this, right? Not only in the Western history, but let's look at the world history, right? Let's look at the entire world. That's part of what I'm trying to do, and I'm saying this as somebody who doesn't have the full Asian history myself, right? It would be hypocritical of me to say, oh, no, I have all of global history in my head. Like I have a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, super intelligent mega machine that can solve every problem, including, I can solve, the Google's number, times pi squared in 0.001 seconds or some nonsense. And I also have all of the world history with zero lies verbatim in my brain. No, that's not possible. So I say this as somebody who is also trying to recapture lost my ancestral Hawaiian, Kanaka Maoli, Pacific Islander, Maori, because we're all interrelated, right? And Indigenous Turtle Island, because we're also interrelated, and we did. Now historians know, or some ahistorical Christian Western brain poisoners who did history at universities covered up the connection between North and South America and the trade routes that were between Hawaiians and other Polynesians and Pacific Islanders and the Micronesians all the way across the Pacific, And so part of reclaiming this is going back and then studying and then learning more. I'm learning Hawaiian and I'm also learning Chinese. you know. And I'm never gonna be fluent in all the languages, but I need to know some and learn enough on top of their history and their politics and their culture, right? So that to try to have a dialectical understanding. Like nobody can have a perfect understanding of all history, but we need to get the important stuff. We need to get an honest history, and we need to get at least some, and we need to get it in good faith, right? And so that's why please don't listen to any Western freaking media, and a lot of, sadly, even public, private, charter, and even higher educational institutions have a lot of nonsense in them, and continue to abuse Hawaiians directly, including the University of Hawaii, including all of the Californian universities, including Canadian universities that literally tried to violate the rights of Hawaiian people with the backing. The universities using the police and military to get their way on our mountain, and crush and trample our indigenous rights in Hawaii. So please don't listen to any of that stuff. You know, particularly from any corporate media coming out of these Western countries, particularly about Asia, particularly about China right now. I said, we try to have some resource. Child Collective, very important source in English. Child Collective, Zhang Yu, Red Rapper, Radio Free Amanda, etc. Anyway, Danny Haifong is a Vietnamese diaspora. He's half white, half Vietnamese, but does important work on global anti-imperialism and global anti-capitalism. Anyways, okay, let me finish this up because it's almost lunch. I gotta get off and eat their foods. So I didn't even talk about what I want. And also to become very clean. I'll just briefly go over there. Like here at the Hill Silver Spukui, as I said, we are not perfect. We don't have all the solutions. I don't have all the solutions for you. If I ever say, hey, you know what? Buy my book, $73 on Amazon. It's called Silver Spook's Guide to the Galaxy and How to Stop Capitalism and Make Your Eyes Bright, Your Teeth Bright, Childbirth of Pleasure. And if I start selling books like some kind of white capitalist, ahistorical Western Christian, history, whitewasher like Jordan Peterson, right, or any of those clowns. If I try to sell you a book about how to make the perfect communist Hawaiian collective or something, you got to run away screaming. I don't have all the answers. I only have what I know, and I don't know everything. I don't know even close to everything. There's no way you could do that. Until I'm like a Dyson sphere or something. But anyways, or I'm like, multi, 11th dimensional M-brain based super, all-knowing Brahma intelligence. But anyways, I don't think I'll ever get there. It can take me a little bit. I got to lift more. Well, when you have, like in the Silver Spukui, like we with Positive Synergy, right? Myself, Holly Argent, Positive Synergy, another Native Hawaiian and longtime friend of mine, also known as Kama, and our two Keiki, our children. We are a part of members of the Hui, right? And as I said, we will make mistakes. We gotta know we're gonna make mistakes. And recently we had a I've been talking about how Positive Synergy and Holly have been working, and we're all help. I try to help too. We're all working on building more housing to house anyone, not only Native Hawaiian, but anyone who needs housing. White college professor, underemployed, Walmart worker, highlighting receipts, no healthcare, trans indigenous person struggling at a pipeline and needs somewhere to get away from abusive. We will house who needs housing. It would be un-Hawaiian for us to not do that. It would not be pono for us to just turn someone away who needed housing or food or anything. That would be not pono. That would be not following our kuleana to all people, not only the Kanaka Maoli, right? So, but the housing that we built, it is housing Hawaiians now. It did house, as I said, it housed a white college student, college professor at one point. But we want to house more people. And some of the money from Patreon goes directly into purchasing the drywall. It's not free. We don't live in a stateless, classes, moneyless society. Electricity, the internet, the fuel to get, not as good as an electric car, which is not as good as an electric high-speed rail, system that we got to pay for the gas to get to the store, to get the drywall, to get the wood. That's expensive now. It's $20 for an 8-foot 2x4. Oh my God. You gotta stop having these ridiculous trade wars and collapsing your, like do some building and stuff, Don't just plunder everyone else, right? Dropping narcotic trafficking and toxic debt and pulling all the silk, tea, China, coal, lithium, copper. Just, make some stuff so that you don't fall into a neo-feudal, like the game Neofeud's hellscape, because it's gonna be bad, because we still gotta kind of like buy stuff from some stores that come from the United States, and it's $20 for a 2x4. Anyway,
I got way off track. So that costs money. So when you give through Patreon to the Silver Spook /cooperative/commune, we use some of that and the labor that we do. All labor here is respected. Just because I do streaming, just because I'm the face of Silver Spook right now, I do educational work. That doesn't make me more important than Holly or Positive Synergy or the Keiki or anyone else. The care work is, I would argue, as or more important than anything else that we do here. You know, than any game that I can make, any anti-capitalist, anti-racist, anti-imperialist, you know, cyberpunk adventure game about social workers and my experiences as a social worker and a ghettoized Hawaiian against billionaires living on the hills as I helped, you know, underemployed and starving, you know, human trafficked Filipinos and Puerto Ricans, and, you know, whatever I can do in Neofeud, that is, I'm gonna keep doing that work. I'm making Neofeud too. When you support us by picking up Neofeud, you support that, and when you give us Patreon or any other support or just share the stream, that's supporting that. And also when you are, but it also supports that important care work that is raising our kids, the Keiki, who are those are the Hawaiians that we are building, that will be the next generation, right? That will not have a poisonous Western Christian colonial historiography, as Voltaire would say, right? That have a, you know, we're trying to give them the best history that we can give, right? They know that America is not the greatest country in the world. You know, they know that already. My siblings know that because they went to Hawaiian immersion schools and they got that history. That's part of how we have succeeded at building this, is because of the education that the younger generations have reclaimed from the banned Hawaiian language and culture and history. That was part of the colonization process. We were severed from our history. My parents think of themselves as Western white capitalists. It's so sad. They're Hawaiian. Anyway, so that is a part of that work. And so when you support that education, we can't do that without this economic support. Just to keep the lights on, keep them fed, keep the house going, keep the cars going. We got a car that's got to get fixed, and it is what it is. We got to get it, otherwise we can't transport the mouse that I'm gonna need to, when the mouse breaks, to do my work, right? To do these streams. We can't pay for the electric, you know. So anyway, so that's what you support. And also when we do the Hui, we work together, and how Positive Synergy has been on the front line of trying to build additional housing, incomplete additional housing that is a guest room, but it also can be used to house. And in the future, these are skills that Positive Synergy can use to build additional housing in other places that we want to do in the most Pono Hui, in the Huawei, in the ancient Hawaiian rock building, and in the modern Hawaiian Silver Spook Games commune way. We want to do this in a way that we're not selling housing for maximum profit. We take the resources that have been pooled, and then we give it as according to ability according to need. And so Positive Synergy is learning these skills which are being acquired. And also it's important, Positive Synergy was telling me, I have learned so much and I haven't been able to build skills, because Positive Synergy is from Honolulu, which is incredibly difficult to survive homelessness. So has suffered homelessness as myself and Holly have in the past while we were working with homeless kids. Very disgusting, right? But that's part of a hierarchical oligarchic system. And anyway, so Positive Synergy said I couldn't learn a lot of skills, but I've been able to learn at the Silver Spook Hui. I've been able to learn a lot of new skills because I have had the time, the energy. I'm not working all the time. Positive Synergy was rationing out water. It's $5 a gallon, and the water was literally coming out orange with burning plastic smell where he was. This is degraded pipe infrastructure. I mean, long story, but not nourished. No time and energy, was dedicating so much time just trying to make rent, and couldn't afford rent. Had to like live with family, you know, who pulled together because you got to survive with reduced rent and you know, and so had no time to build skills under that incredible pressure of capitalism, under the illegal occupation of Hawaii, right? And feeling alone and disconnected. And now Positive Synergy is here with us, and you know, just one of the benefits. I mean, this is just one benefit, is even just learning growing as a person. The time to even just go through like therapy, go through Ho'oponopono, that's right making with other people's with himself, and learn these skills. And that is and just detoxify from a lot of that negative capitalist mentality, negative just hustle mentality that's like in your blood. Like when I first got here, I remember that working like, I gotta work 60 hours because if I'm not working 60 hours, we're all gonna starve. I remember freaking out most of my life. I have like nightmares. I literally do math in my head sometimes in my dreams. I'm like, are we gonna? I made $1,000 this month because I got my hours dropped in. Am I gonna have to sell some plasma or flip some cars on the street in order to make the rent? I have like nightmares about this because when I was working full time as a social worker STEM teacher, right? That's what Neofeud's about, right? Carl Carbon actually like doesn't really give the full brunt of like what that was like sometimes in Neofeud. But I had to detox from that lifestyle of just like working, not asking why, not asking for whom, not asking like, hey, maybe how could I make decisions in the workplace and who eat together, not for a billionaire or millionaire's profit, but for the collective good of all of us, right? These are questions I could never ask. What is my Hawaiian history? Because I'm too busy working. No mental health, sometimes even to relate to my wife, Holly, and the kids. I'll come home and be like, so pissed off because of how stressful the job was. And that was terrible and destructive. Just very unhealthy. Individually, physically, biophysically, probably decreased my life expectancy by a few years, just that level of cortisol all the time, but also just not healthy because I could not learn. And the things that I have now, what I'm telling you now, I would not have had that if I had not had access to a less colonized part of Hawaii that has more Hawaiian kuleana, aloha, aina, pono like this place does. The Big Island, which is totally different from Oahu. So let me just say that. And because of that, the gift that is the Hawaiianness that is on this island, whether it is not a hustle, 30 hours is full time, because Hawaiian values perpetuate. There's no homelessness struggle. People that are homeless, we have a neighbor that like doesn't have a house, but chooses to do that. He works like less than, like, he doesn't really work, but he's not struggling and like suffering and dying, because he has access to family, he has access to healthcare. The family have access to their own time and energy because they only work 20, 30 hours, and they have a house. He is that way because he chooses not to. But that's a long discussion about what the Big Island is and the differences. But they live in that indigenous Hawaiian way, not in a Honolulu style capitalist way. And so that's part of how we can do what we do, and part of our job to pay for the gifts that were given to us. The gift of not having to freak out about $2,000 rent with a $2,300 salary, not having to and then like how I'm gonna starve tomorrow. Right, working as full time, and the gift that was to give us the time to educate and teach you whatever you have learned, and if that's valuable, consider giving through Patreon if you want. But to support, not to support my, get me getting some designer drugs and a yacht and a mansion. I don't know. I mean, you can have fishing boat. I don't have any. That's not. We're gonna do anything like that. This is all of it that comes in. It's like, it's weird to spend any money on anything that's like a personal luxury item. It's just like weird, but we don't really do that. When it comes in, it's to be paid for. To not do that, to take the labor value of other people, whether that's your money or the labor of my partner. Under patriarchy, that's what it is. The first exploitation is the personal serf. That's the wife, the woman or the woman-coded person in a relationship, and it would not be Hawaiian to do that. It would not be kuna. It would not be pono. It would not be kuleana. We would not be huiing to do that, and it would not be. It is all to be paid for. And so part of paying that forward, what we get, and expanding to build more housing and to build more possibilities for people to detoxify and get re-education. Right, it's just education for the first time, and just informational, intellectual healing. Right, of undoing the poisonous Western Christian historiography. Right, undoing your American education, which is not an education system; it is a lot of lies. Right, to undo that, we have to pay that forward, and that also means that we building that housing. And I want to say so, but we don't always do that perfectly at the Silver Spokui. And so there was not enough communication. And it kind of built up over a week, some time, whatever amount of time, too much time. We didn't communicate enough. There was like frustrations going on, and it kind of blew up yesterday, and there was a lot of talking, and there's a lot of frustration, but ultimately it came down to is, Positive Synergy and Holly and myself, and Positive, Positive Synergy did say I could talk about this, so I don't want to give all. I don't want to everybody everything out, but I want to say that like there were people were felt like they were not being hooeyed with, and that needs to be communicated. It's felt like, hey, I don't feel like we are having that meeting, because part of hooey not just working together, but it's also the meeting, coming together, and having that connection. I don't feel like we're having that enough. That's really what it was, and it's like, hey, yeah, you know what? You're right. And I thought like, hey, things are okay at this rate, and you're talking to, I thought that it's enough, but it's like we overlooked it. We overlooked it, and we said, we need to have more. We need to have more get together. We need to have more ho'oponopono, which is to make right. Pono is again righteousness. We have more time together, and we have to like consciously try to do that, and not just kind of let it. Because it's easy to let things slide. I'm a very ADHD, where I'm a very obsessive compulsive. I have OCD. Like I kind of like, and I get really into my thing. And we all have our own weirdnesses that are all kind of they're all the exhaust. They're all the long wreckage, the long baggage of having been born and raised in a racist, capitalist, colonialist. In Holly's life. Conservative Christian, patriarchal, especially sort of sense, and we have all of our baggage from growing up in all of this. We have all of our own experiences that these are not just going to go away because we just say, "Oh, I'm an anarchist, I'm a socialist, I'm a communist now. I'm for LGBTQ rights, and I don't like patriarchy, and I'm for equality and stateless classes in the society." It would be incredibly. It would be very much a young race. It would be very much a young people thing to do, to say. Now that I've changed my bio, it's a very American thing to do. I can just put on Gatsby's clothes, and I go from a pauper to a rich mansion owner. No, this is not how this works. I will forever be undoing all that was done to me for 30 plus years of my life under the illegal colonial occupation of a white supremacist capitalist empire, and living in that and struggling in that. And that is a forever job. My children will have a better chance, not at being perfect human beings, but at being better, right? And so we will. I said this before on the stream, but I want to reiterate: who is collectives, cooperatives, communal living situations will make mistakes. The number one downfall is the lack of acknowledgement of mistakes, the lack of communication and communication about these failings, and the pretense that everything is fine, right? Which is, I would argue, the failing of anarchists, socialists, communes, sometimes even kibbutz. This is the Jewish kind of version of this, as I understand it. I'm sorry if I'm misrepresenting that. But the attempts to live in a non-capitalistic, non-hierarchical, non-exploitative way, right? Particularly in places like North America, and also here on the Big Island as well. This has where people come and they try to do it and it fails, and then they go back. Part of it is because of that same undialectical severing from the true history, right? And thinking you have the answer because of that, but if you only have a very shallow cut of what is really, you have a shallow understanding of what is happening that needs to be much deeper than that. Not to criticize anyone else and be like, oh, you're just wrong because you don't have 10,000 years of indigenous Hawaiian, Turtle Island, and Chinese and African history. You don't have but we have to have a better and fuller understanding, and not in the actual understanding is one thing, but even I would argue even more important is the openness to the idea that, hey, I don't have all the history, I don't have all the answers, and approach that in good faith, and really be like really honest and humble. I know it's a hard thing to do. If you come from a self-made, entrepreneurial, capitalist, venture capitalist based culture, it's not just the rich, it's everyone that is doing that, going, hey, we got to figure out whatever way, fake it till you make it. So what you're saying is be ahistorical till you make it. Most people aren't going to make it. So that means that most people under that American rags to riches dream are ahistorical about themselves. You're beginning in poison and toxicity, and so that bleeds into, even if you think, even if some of that way of being bleeds into the communal structure, and then people say, hey, this is working out pretty good. I'm going to take a bunch of the Patreon money and the money that we've raised from this fundraiser, and I'm going to use it and spend it on my own personal luxuries and lie to the rest of the group. And I know I don't want to call anyone out. I don't want to start drama, but I know people that have personally done this in their own cooperative and communal attempts in North America and around the world. And this has happened because of unexamined, not only because everybody just has these problems, and everybody hasn't done the work, right? Everybody's doing ongoing work, but the lack of ability to just be honest and examine and be open and try to be as historically true, right? Of the history of what you're doing, about what it is, and be open about and communicate that. And if people feel like, hey, this is not being pono, this is not being righteous, we're not living up to our constitution, right? Now you can never have a constitution as good as the Chinese, according to Voltaire. But I mean, you cannot. I'm just kidding. We're not living up to our manifesto. We're not living up to what we agreed to when we joined this collective, right? And so yesterday was this is a long roundabout way to say yesterday there was a very important conversation that was had between myself, Holly, and Positive Synergy about what we were doing that could be done better, what we were doing that was hurting each other, how we felt about that, why that we felt that, which involves, some of it was historical analysis, but just internally, like, hey, in my history, I was abused in school, I was bullied, and I go silent because that was what I did. When people said, you're the poor kid with the holes in their shoes, you're the fat brown kid, I was among rich white kids at a school that cost $20,000 a year to go now, for elite children of the inheritors of, Dole pineapple and sugar plantation rich families. And me and Positive Synergy were the two brown kids, right? And we talk about this. The two Hawaiian kids in the rich white and Asian school, the Gusano type. But anyways, and like my response was like, shut down, don't talk, become silent, pull inward. Some people respond by violence, and some. I had a fourth grade teacher that said, hey, just slug them one time. Slug those bullies that are calling you the fat brown kid. The fat, poor brown kid. Just punch them out one time. You're bigger than them. You could beat them up. Just beat them up and then they'll stop teasing you. That's not my way. I couldn't do that. I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to hit people. Also, I would probably just get in trouble, and that might not help. But my response was to shut down and become silent. And that's what I do. Holly knows this. And, and I'll air my own stuff. But, we all have our own personal things. Like, Positive Synergy, didn't have a lot of the good family experiences that I had. I had the luxury of loving. My parents at least were together, and they were loving, and they were a strong, positive relationship despite all their failings and internal colonization. They believing that they believe in their Western capitalist white Christian historiography of the public school disinformation system that told them that they weren't Hawaiian and the Hawaiians were backward. They have a lot of that problem, but they had a good relationship, and I believe a lot of that was the Hawaiian is shining through other methods, even though intellectually they were, believe they're American, Christian, brown people, because Hawaiians are gone, right? But that's shone through. And anyway, and so I had the luxury of my parents having that together, and Positive Synergy didn't have all these luxuries, these lucky happenstances. And I noticed lots of kids that I work with as a social work and STEM teacher. I had kids that had no parents. Parents were in prison. Parents overdosed on drugs, right? And that's a thing. That's like the norm. Right? It was unusual for me to have that. Even if you didn't have parents from the ghetto and they were middle class, a lot of divorce rates like over half, right? So this was a norm, and so like becoming distant, that's very sensitive. And so all this together, long story short, so all this together, like, and so all of these weirdnesses and quirks of our own historiography of ourselves psychologically and our own past that are part of this past that we have to acknowledge. We can't just pretend that we're all perfect. Because I read Marxist-Leninism and anarchism and I have a degree, now I know how to lead a collective perfectly. I can hui together perfectly, and let me tell you, no, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to miscommunicate things. I'm going to not communicate things. Even if I know later on, oh man, I should have said this. That would have been the right thing to do. In the moment, I'm like going into this weird mode because I'm like, oh, I'm afraid of something that was said, and I'm like not talking enough because I'm becoming silent. And anyway, so all that built up, and it built up into, over days and then weeks. If that was allowed to fester and that was not communicated, right, in the Silus Pukui, that could be incredibly problematic, could destroy things. That is how many cooperatives, whether those are restaurants, bakeries, even larger things like Pros of the Round, Communist Patreon, $10,000 a month podcasts of communists, white communists, ended up taking a bunch of money, embezzling it, and starting their own upstart, capitalist, hipster craft brewery, right? With abused labor, this, but that's not because people are bad. It's just there's a lack of openness, there's a lack of honesty, there's a lack of open discussion. You can't hui, if you don't talk. You can't have a meeting with no talking, and if you don't meet at all, then you ain't doing no talking, right? Even if you digitally Zoom hui, you still gotta hui, you gotta talk, and you gotta really, be honest about these things. Don't just hui and go, oh yeah. Because part of it is like we each of us, we're trying not to step on each other's toes, and we're going, hey, I don't want to piss off. I'm just trying to like do my own thing. Sometimes it's kind of like I just want to get the work done because I know you guys have a lot to do. This is actually all three of us are doing this. I got a lot to do, so I'm not gonna talk. I'm gonna just like let you do that. I'm gonna get this done trying to be nice. But then over time, right? Then it's kind of like, but then sticking and getting each of our individual jobs done, and not talking, because we're trying to be nice, ends up in I'm upset now because I'm misreading the not talking as you don't want to talk to me, or I don't want you around anymore, or something bad, right? So then so this kind of like even well-meaning, well-intentioned, right? You're gonna have these problems, which is why you gotta hui in the meaning sense, and then work together for the collective benefit, right? You in a capitalist organization where one person or a handful of people with the board of the board of executives elected by the major shareholders, right, or whatever, or just a boss at a small capitalist pizzeria, whatever it is, you can't hui. The boardroom is not a hui. The boardroom is a ruling class, Palace at Versailles tea sipping ceremony where they talk about what they're going to do with their wealth. That's not a hui. Hui is everybody come together. Janitor, care worker, right? Programmer, artist, right? EA Games is not a hui. EA Games is a handful of tea sipping Montesquieu's get together and talk about what are we going to do with the billions of $50 million bonus we're going to take from all their 100-hour crunch working programmers and 3 artists that did the FIFA soccer game. That's not a hui, right? There's no communication, right? A union is workers trying to hui against the current rulers of that. Even better though, what's even better than unions is a fully pono organization to complete a project, whether those are games, food, truck, pizzeria, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-racist, cyberpunk game making, and Hawaiian house building and educational organization like Silver Spoon Games. Whatever it is, you cannot hui unless people have communication, and then mistrust breeds, anger breeds. That's why you always feel angry and mistrustful of your bosses and the executives, even if they're nice to you at a capitalist, whether that's Walmart or, any business, a gas station, what the hell are these executives even doing? Because it's not a hui. It's not a cooperative. It's for the benefit of a handful of people, and you are being exploited. Sometimes they tell you that, and sometimes they pretend like they're your friend, and they go, "Oh, we're all here to have our employee ceremony. Let's hear your grievances. Here, have a donut hole, and then actually we're gonna fire everybody who's disabled, but lie to you about that, and let's all have a company cleanse." They don't care about you. At a capitalist corporation. So, anyways, it is now 2:00. Okay, I gotta get up. So I hope that's how we can hui better. But I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that because it's very important. We did have this big talk, and it's important that we share this because to highlight that we don't have the answers, even having intellectually answers. This is a self criticism and self highlighting that whatever I do have, some people go call me, Silver Spook has a lot to say and a lot of education to give, and thank you for listening. Whatever you find worth listening to. I don't want to get any more megalomaniacal than I have to, but thank you for listening for whatever you learn, whatever you do learn. But I don't have all the answers, and even if I did, and I don't think anybody does, even if I did have a lot of answers, I could not follow even my own manifesto. People do this because of psychologically, libidinally, spiritually, emotionally who I am and who anyone is. Just because you could have the most amazing thesis to solve all of the world's economic, social, political problems and still have emotional, personal, familial trauma and harm and PTSD just hanging on to you, and then you fail to implement any of it, which is another error. It's another. I think that's a lot of what makes a lot of these projects fail. So we have to like recognize that and go, holy shit, man, we have like so many freaking problems, all of us, and then we have to talk about that and go like, this is why I did that, and you look back at that and go, this is why we did that, and then we got to try to not do that and try to do it better the next time, and come clean, be dialectical like the Chinese, we don't have 3,500 years of all of it. They had paper for thousands of years before any Western barbarist had access to a Bible or the historiography of Montesquieu's family and how feudalism is good. They got paper and then they weaponized it to disinform everyone. And the Chinese had it for thousands. They kept it because if these barbarians over there, if they get hold of this paper, all they're gonna do is take the paper and write millions of printing presses worth of lies for all their students in the public in all their schools, in all their textbooks, and in all of their disinformation that the CIA is gonna do. That's very smart that they kept it away from. For a long time. It was actually a slave was brought back by the Western barbarians who do slavery. From China slavery was abolished and had legal protections in the 2nd century AD. Something you need to learn. And so that's how they got paper, was actually enslaving the Chinese and bringing them back to Western Europe. On top of other technology like the movable type, the T fireworks, which was turned into weapons of death and destruction, guns, right? That was Chinese could have taken over, but anyway, there's a lot to say about them. They're very important brothers and sisters, the Chinese. But anyways, so back to sum this up, and so back to that kind of that beginning, what I started with, which is the Shahui. There's another word I wanted to bring up, which is Xiaokang Shahui. Xiao is in Chinese. I'm probably mispronouncing it. I'm sorry if any Chinese speakers here. I'm sorry for my young beginner Mandarin. I believe that's Mandarin, and I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong. Xiao is small, few, young. Kang, peaceful, abundant, healthy. So Shao Kahn, not to be confused with Shao Kahn, the final boss from Mortal Kombat 2. Xaiokang. Shao Kahn is few, small, young, peaceful, abundant, healthy, Kang is prosperous. I'm sorry. Shao is few, small, young. Kang is peaceful, abundant, and so Shao Kahn is a small prosperity, or a moderate abundance, right? Shahui is society, right? And again, it's very important that the word that means society for the Chinese is the people huiing together. The word hui is part of the word that means to be a civilization, right? As I understand, I could be mistaken, but the dragon, like in The Iron Mask, which is a great movie with starring Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Iron Mask is a great film about the deals with the colonial period of China and other peoples. Sha also refers to the dragon, and I'm sorry if I'm getting this wrong as well, but I believe the dragon is not just like a monster, a beast. To the Western world, it's just kind of a beast that has to be slain. But the dragon in the Chinese culture represents wisdom, and it also represents, as I understand it, it is everything, and it kind of happens at the very end of Iron Mask. The dragon is everything. It's the mountains. It's the ocean, the waves. It's the river that feeds us, that nourishes, that God gives us drink, that waters, the healing tea. It is the clouds, and it is all of us. We are all the dragon. We all everything, and also our ancestors, the nature itself. We are the dragon, And then the Western media likes to put the dragon grabbing the globe and go like, this is the evil dragon that's coming to get us. Not unlike, this is not the same, but of course, like the dragons had to be killed and slain. But the dragon of the on the Time magazine, New York Times, and Washington Post, the dragon claw grabbing the world, right? It's just kind of fear of that. But you don't need to fear the dragon. The dragon is all as I understand it, is all the people. The Mo'o is a defender of all of nature for the Hawaiian people is similar to the way that, as I understand it, the Chinese dragon understanding. It's not a dragon specifically, it's a serpent. This is all lost in a lot of this is in translation, it gets fuzzy. But in the Mo'o, Kalihi Valley, where I'm from, is actually the ridgeline of a great mountain, which is the sleeping Mo'o, the great dragon serpent. And the nose of the dragon, my brother actually works at Ho'ulu Aina, where they do land-based Hawaiian education, and like what you're seeing in the rock wall building there. The nose of the dragon is this great rock, and when we walk past it, and I actually went to Obama's sister who had a birthday party there. We were planting indigenous trees to push back the alien invasives, kind of like pushing back the alien invasive concrete jungle and hyper-capitalist military-industrial complex dystopia that is Honolulu. So we're planting back these Hawaiian trees to reforest this area under a grant. And we stopped at the it's Maya Sotoro, who is related to Obama. Obama's a war criminal. Anyway, that's a long story. But and she said, don't give me a birthday present. Just bring a tree. Just bring any Hawaiian tree, and we're gonna plant it. And we planted it there at Ho'ulaina. And the nose of the rock that represented all of the great defender of the Aina, the Mo'o. Solomon Enos is a Hawaiian artist and painter that has a great series on the Mo'o. The dragon. The nose is there at Ho'ulaina, of the nose of the dragon. And the dragon's body is the entire mountain, right? That descends on a sloping hillside into Ke'ehi Lagoon, which currently is poisoned with United States military runoff and fuel and sludge, and very sad. And the landfill that they dumped in the Ahupua'a that I'm from, it's called Kalihi industrial sector. It's like the Oakland, the Camden, the poor black and environmentally toxified area of, sadly, illegally occupied Hawaii. It's where I'm from, Kalihi Valley. That's why it's very poor. And the water has come out with lead and chromium-6 for a long time, poisonous chemicals that cause cancer, birth defects. So, but anyway, but the dragon, the Mo'o, the dragon that defends. So I'm pronouncing it like Mondragon. I've been jumping between Basque indigenous history and in Chinese and then to Hawaii. But the dragon, the Mo'o that defends, that is my brother in a certain sense, is part of the dragon that's trying to push back and defend nature and the people who are being disrespected at the same time in Kalihi Valley, living 20 to a house, working for $3 an hour on Macau Ice and send you back to Thailand or whatever colonial hellscape that I took you out of, or just throw you in prison to make Amazon Whole Foods vegan and non-vegan cheese for 25 cents an hour, which is a thing that Hawaiians do in Arizona State Prison, sadly. And to push back against that, the Mo'o is a defender of the dragon that tries to defend Kalihi. But the dragon is the people. The dragon is nature, which the people are part of. The Aina. The dragon, the Mo'o, is all of the island. It is the whole island, right? It's very similar. I know this could be a misreading, but I believe that there is something to this. And this is a understanding. Even Voltaire said, to tie this back into Europe, even Voltaire said that the monotheistic, patriarchal domination of the monotheistic God of Europe, which in tandem with the patriarchal domination of kings and then capitalist oligarchs of Europe and then of America. And Voltaire said that the wisest nation has shown what a natural religion reduced to deism and morality. And I would argue that not natural in the sense of like in tune with nature, the ecology, which the Chinese do have. This is something that connects us as well, and the deep respect for it. Not to say that no European and no American has no respect, but there is. It is not as normalized. The interpretation of the Christian Western historiography of domination of, as in Neofeud, Clinton Bush would say, the multiplanetary conglomerate world owner who destroyed all of the Earth for his own wealth and benefit, left a toxic radioactive husk of underemployed sentient machine slumdogs. He says the Earth is and all the living things upon it are ours to subdue as we see fit. For like pets or cattle, for God has granted us the greatness of our dynasties. God made us king or billionaire or man, white man specifically, to reign upon and rule and subdue all of these terrestrial living things. That is not What it means in that sense, that is not the Western belief system, and this belief that you could just fully separate all of religion and all of economics, ecology, sustainability, familial relationships, social relationships. This is also a mistake, but that is a deep belief that it goes unexamined, often. Is the idea that we subdue and as we see fit the earth and the environment. And when we treat our working class people like we treat the earth, we treat our wives in the Western world as the way we treat the earth. We treat nature, we treat the entire ecology and the ability for earth to support life the way we treat the plants, the trees, and everything else, right? We treat the colonized nations as that which is to subdue as we see fit. And so that's another thing that Voltaire was trying to highlight as the difference between the Chinese and the Europeans in his writings. And they didn't. Let me tell you, the barons and the lords and the kings, they did not like it, and they wrote their own writing. It was called Oriental Despotism and Yellow Peril, a continuation of Yellow Peril. And so, but anyway, so the dragon, the mole, defends all of the nature and the water, and the land and the soil and the ahupua'a of Kalihi, where I'm from, right? And similarly, in the dragon, in the sha, we all of us together, hui, shahui, that's the word that means society. Shahui in Chinese. Shahui is also the word shahui zuyi. Zuyi is ism or principle or doctrine in Chinese. Shahui zuyi, the practice of society, is the word that means socialism in Chinese. Shahui zuyi with Chinese characteristics. So that's why I say I would argue that much of socialism with Chinese characteristics may be actually regarded. They're too humble to say this. They would never say this, but it's Chineseism with socialist characteristics. But they would not say that. In the same way that they do not ask for thanks for saving millions of people and billions of people suffering. Giannis will point out the Chinese, by buying up massive quantities of debts that capitalism could not deal with, the Chinese socialists saved, or the Chineseists with socialism characteristics saved global capitalism, and did not ask for thanks. And they don't ask for thanks, but that literally, that's not a new word, that's an old word. Shahui Juyi, socialism. The practice of huiing together. The practice of all people huiing together. Cooperating together. In a worker-owned cooperative, in a commune, collectively for the benefit of all. It is not a mistake that word is like, that word was in Xi Jinping's speech, which the West derided, and they tried to turn it into the evil dragon coming to dominate the West, right? They mistranslated part of his speech. The New York Times and the Washington Post, they said, China seeks anyone who would stop with the dragon becoming anyone who would stop China from becoming the greatest superpower will be bashed upon the rocks of the Great Wall of Steel. There's a mistranslation. It was those who would seek to bully, to brutalize, to exploit, to enslave the Chinese will be bashed upon the Great Wall of Steel. We will defend ourselves and our borders. We cannot, and you as a cooperative, you must defend your border. You cannot allow abusers, Nazis, and you know this by now, right? In the leftist space, that lesson should be taken, right? Hey, just let anyone say anything that they want at any time in your space. No, you have to have your own great walls of mod, because your hui, your collective, your cooperative can be infected by those who would seek to exploit and to make it unequal. And without some defense, not to crush and attack, but you must defend, your comrades, your cooperative, your friends, you don't let anyone just in and go, hey, can I have all your social security number? Hey, everybody. Hey, N-word, inside of your stream, right? You must defend. And that's what so Sarah said, that's what the mole and that's what the dragon are there for, is defense of all of us, the Ohana, Ohana and Kalo are elder in Hawaiian culture. Kalo is our elder brother. Nature is our family. We are descendants of Mauna Papa and Wakea, who watered on Mauna Kea, mountain of Wakea, who watered all of the earth. Papa, the earth mother, watered by the sky father, who gave birth to Kalo, our elder brother, the firstborn, and then humanity, is the secondborn. And that's why we respect and we care for Kalo. So again, that's part of what Voltaire would call the natural deistic, beliefs, right? That are not just about worshiping and having God. It's about these are value, these are morality that are also cultural, that are also spiritual. These are all intertwined, right? And so that's a part of the mistaken severedness of the Western is to break it off into there's religion here, and then there's religion here, and then there's morality values here, and then there's this, and there's economics over here, you know. That's so when I do what I'm doing, I'm trying to reconnect all of that which has been disconnected within you. It was disconnected within me when you learn the English language and you're taught in any Western capitalist world institution. It has to be. So that's part of this reconnection. Anyway, so one more thing I want to say. I'm gonna get in trouble if I play the actual Xi Jinping speech. So I'm not gonna play the whole speech, but where is it? Yeah. So the Xi Jinping speech. Okay, but there's one part of the speech where he actually says, let me see if I have it.
Let us cherish founding, consolidation, and development of the Communist Party of China.
Okay, I don't have it. There's a part in this speech where he actually says, we here in China, we are building the Xiaokang Shihui. What that means is we are building the, as far as I understand it, I'm not fluent. I'm like learning this as we go. But what it means is we are building the moderate prosperity, right? Moderate, the small, right? Xiao and then Kang prosperity. Moderate prosperity, right? Just good life, not exorbitant life, not billionaire life, not 25 golden toilets and 76 private jets and a private island and a floating space island and all of the resources in Africa, right? That are building my golden and emerald lined gowns that I wear as the techno king of Tesla, right? Techno king. He literally called himself, Elon Musk called himself the techno king. That's not me. He's literally writing my thesis for me. But moderate prosperity. So this was part of like a very important part of that speech. I recommend if you have the time, listen to some of the speech of the largest country that has the greatest success story for poverty alleviation, that leads in regreening, undesertification, renewable technology, and save the many people on Earth from the collapse of the failures of capitalism. Just try and give it a listen if you can get past the anti-Asian racism. I'm not saying that just try, because but when he talks about there's a part that says Xiaokang Shuhi. What that means is Xiaohui is we want to build a moderate prosperity for all of us working together, the Hui, right? And this is not, he didn't invent it. This has been in existence for some time. And to build that, we will require certain trade-offs. We will need to work against imperialism. We need to take some loans, unfortunately. We have to, at Silver Spook Hui, we have to use capitalist-made dirty and electricity, some of it, to power this monitor that I'm looking at this speech on and this camera. We have to work with game distribution platforms that are not necessarily cooperative. We have to do things that we don't want to do under the current circumstances. And we can argue, was that the best decision under that circumstance? Vietnam had to do things that didn't want to do, but it had to do and organize and build a state to fight a war against an imperialist that killed 3 million of them in Agent Orange. It's called the United States. That was just one, right? These are not things that and anyway, and so, but to build a moderately prosperous society that we want to achieve, we have to do what we have done. We hope to continue to do that. We do not have all answers. We have problems, and that's why I don't believe that this is not something that they say. They don't say we are the greatest in the world, and they explicitly say all nations are equal. The United States is the one that says we are the greatest nation on earth. We deserve to lead, like Montesquieu deserves to be the ruler. Right? Like Elon Musk deserves his 200 billion. We, the nation of the United States, as a capitalist, imperialist, Western liberal democracy under capitalism, which is a lie, but that's normal Western ahistorical Christian historiography. We deserve to lead. No, they don't want that. They don't want to enforce their ways on you. They don't want to steal. They would like to partner. They would like to work in mutual cooperation if you really listen. You really listen, even to their leader. You know what I know that's very hard to do because nobody wants to really listen a lot of the time. They want to just get their personal social clout today. They want to get a lot of likes for their and retweets today. And a lot of people around them have too much anti-Asian racism and not enough dialectics. And I understand that, and that sucks. And we have to have courage to break through those barriers and be like, hey, I know that not a lot of people are going to want to hear this, but we need to like honestly listen to our brothers and sisters over there. They're not our enemy, right? And what they have to say is very important. I think it's important. Even if you disagree, you're like, well, they're not doing that. They're just doing capitalism, whatever, but I mean, at least hear it, I wanted to bring that up because that is what we're trying to build at the Silver Spook Games. Shakang Shu Hui. We're trying to build not great prosperity for Silver Spook, not amazingly abundant super prosperity for Silver Spook, or for the head of the governor of the Big Island, or for the Ali. That's a mistranslation. It's not king. We don't want 25. I don't want 25 yachts in a mansion. We're trying to build moderate, decent prosperity for the Shahui, for all of us, all the people and nature cooperatively working together. That's what we want. And so of course, I'm reading some things into it. I mean, but I mean, like we have to look beyond. We have to look deeper. We have to look beyond the blinders of our current moment in history, which is rife with divisions between West and East, which are rife with obviously anti-Asian racism. Unless, if Western Christian capitalist poisonous historiography goes back you can't even remember what happened last month. I don't know if you know what happened, but there was whole stop Asian hate that didn't work. It's still there, you gotta. That's the time that is the moment that we live in, and we have to recognize why are we living in that moment. Not how do I debunk this lie, that lie, this lie, that lie. There's a very important with the Child Collective by KJ No that's about this. It is while it is important to debunk lies, there's a fire hose of disinformation. We have to look at deeper, wider. Why are we in this moment? Why are they blasting us with this hate? Right? It's not enough to just go, this Washington Post article is wrong. That NYT article is wrong. Wait. The gray zone debunked this. We're going to play whack-a-mole. We can play whack-a-mole for a long time, and that will not get us to where we need to be without a deeper dialectical understanding with real history of the colonial era. Right? And then, okay, this is why the CIA is telling you when you really want to learn. The ruling class of the West and America is telling you why. He's saying, we need to stop China from, we need to stop the rising dragon. We need to stop the access to decolonization. They even say, if Russia and China get access, and other countries get access to waivers, because they ask for vaccine waivers so that everyone can make any amount of the vaccines, any formula, and China has backed this, right? And they used to come out and say, Goldman Sachs said, if we allow, and for the pharmaceutical company said, if we allow, other countries like Russia and China to get access to other technologies, they could create vaccines for diseases like cancer and other illnesses, and we make a lot of money from them. They literally just said that. Come on and say this sick stuff for our Western capitalist pharmaceutical industries, right? And so even there's these acknowledgments if you really look closely, and they're also saying everything that you think it's a wordless or jukebox. The CIA comes out with a story, and everybody, we can make every radio station, every newspaper, and article sing it. So when you see a Western media article, right, you gotta really take a step back, right? Step back into history, right? Hui back with all of the ancestors and go hey, what the heck is going on with this story? This sounds fishy, That's what Luna says in Vietnam. When I see something comes out of Western media. And China and Vietnam have had problems. Again, they don't have a perfect history. But Luna, even when it's about China, okay, well now they're saying this to me in Vietnam about China, but I wonder what this is really about. Let's look at the history. Why would this organization say X about China? And they say that they're trying to destroy Vietnam, or they're trying to imperialize us. Maybe they are, but let's investigate. This is coming from NED, the National Endowment for Democracy. This is coming from Human Rights Watch. Wait. They say all kind of terrible stuff about us. They've lied, and they're all on the take for giant Western military industrial complex. And so I don't know. I don't trust that. Let's investigate, right? Oh my God, wait, this is not true. This is to try to get a ring of try to ring in and turn all of the countries surrounding China against it. And yeah, they don't always have all of our best interests at heart, but we have a primary contradiction here. It's imperialism, and it's coming out of the United States, and it's capitalist structure. Like, they murdered 3 million of us. Like, you know, we have fought skirmishes, and historically problems have happened, and, you know, even Hawaiians, we've had skirmishes, and problems have happened, but we are here now, and this is where we are. This is the history, then this is where we're at. This is the history of the United States, and this is where it's at. And this is pointing to this news article that I'm reading, this headline, this blue checkmark tweet, this whatever information is coming out about this second is poisonous Western Christian historiography. Anyway, that's how this can be applied. One more thing, I know just specifically about Luna. You know, and Luna says 9 times out, just to tag Vietnam in it, the word Hui is also a Vietnamese word. 9 times out of 10, I legitimately can't even understand what the heck an anti-communists are trying to say. I think they just pile up more and more words, believing that the more words you get, the stronger that the argument. This is part of the strategy. That is part of the strategy. Have a mountain of lies, right? I know someone who used to live in Vietnam, like, what the heck, right? Again, ahistorical, undialectical nonsense. And, you know, my comment was capitalism and whiteness, and these barbaric structures is about piling up mountains of worthless lies to bury the valuable truths, right? And then making off with the spoils as the victims try to dig themselves out from the fire hose of disinformation, as the CIA called it, right? Like dumping opium or bombs on a people and then running away with the tea, the silk, the minerals, the oil, the Shanghai slaves. And I'm tagging both China and Africa in on that one. Slaves, well, there's lots of slaves, but the Chinese were slaves and the Africans were slaves, right? Well, dumping toxic waste, toxic debt, toxic opium in the opium wars, and then pillaging, right? And so we have to, sometimes it is important to debunk some of this, right? But it is important to step back and say, why are they dumping this mountain? Rather than taking a shovel to dig yourself out of a mountain of lies, and every second they add another quarter mile to that mountain, right? We can debunk each individual lie, and we'll be doing that for the rest of our life. They have $300 million just to dump lies about the Belt and Road alone, right? Let alone all the billion. They have all the quantitative easing infinity, neo-feudal, techno-feudal, post-capitalist central bank money to pay every millennial and Gen Z and Gen X to dump lies out and make up lies for every think tank in the world nonstop. You can't compete with the amount of lies. We can't simply be digging out all the lies. What we have to do is like have at least a part of it is to say, what is this mountain about? Why are they throwing all of this dump here, right? And go, hey, where's the source of this dump coming from? Oh, I see. It's a handful of, little, fucking money grubbing old men with a bag of money, like Wizard of Oz sorcerers moving a giant machine that's spewing money. The money is worthless, right? Like this painting. The G7 painting. The last, right? This political cartoon, right? This is an important cartoon because it does call out what we're talking about, right? The Last Supper. I want the full image, please. The last, right? The satirical cartoon mocking the G7's attempts to block success in China. And it's a falcon. It's an American eagle, right? It's an American eagle with a British lion, Canadian beaver, right? And all the G7 remaining young race, barbarous, feudalist, capitalist, slavery, colonialists, sitting around taking pieces of toilet paper because they don't have anything to give. They have nothing left to give but toilet paper dollars. They don't have Boeing 733 planes. They can't make computer chips. They don't make anything. They dump out this worthless money. They have money, fiat money, and they have lies. And through this, we can still rule the world. Again, with their Western Christian cross behind them, as part of the Western Christian poisonous historiography, and they think they can still rule the world, right? And there's a cake with China on it, and this is how we rule Africa. This is how we rule Central South America. We just load them up with toxic debt and nuclear weapons, and then threaten everyone with the nukes. That's the radioactive waste. And so it's important to kind of like see through. Sometimes it takes art and poetry, which is why I speak in a kind of poetic, prosaic, artistic way to kind of break through this mountain of lies, because we're gonna spend eternity. You could spend like 25 trillion eternities, times a Googleplex eternities, trying to dig your way out of colonialist lies. So sometimes we have to just kind of call it all out. Why are they saying these things? It is now late in the day, and I feel like I need to leave. However, I shall end with thanks everybody for watching. Who eat together, work together. Understand we will have problems, we will have problems when we do these things. We're not going to do it perfectly. The Chinese have not done everything perfectly. The Vietnamese, Hawaiians, we have not done everything perfectly. However, we will try to do things better. So Silver Spook Hui has not done everything perfectly. We had a Ho'oponopono yesterday, and we tried to Hui together better in the Sha Hui. As part of the Sha Hui, all of us, the society, and the local Hui, the Silver Spook Hui. Thank you everybody for the support that have given to us. I'm gonna read some chat real fast. I'm sorry, chat, I don't read a lot of it. Confidential translation of is moderately prosperous society. Yeah, moderately prosperous society. Yeah. And Shahui is the word for socialism. Oh, one more I want to throw out there. Shahui Juyi, socialism, the study of how to live as a society. Socialism is literally just being a society for the Chinese. So I think that's very telling, right? That's a very old word. That's not a new word. Gongshan Shahui is communism. Gong is common, to share together. Chan, property. Estate, to produce birth product. So common shared property, right? In Hui is the final state, right? It's the end state. We don't yet live in fully communal shared property with no boundaries, right? We hope to get there, right? As a socialist, as honest leftists, right? Socialist anarchists, we hope to get there. We're not sure fully the path. We discuss and we debate in good faith the path, and each individual people's path, right? So Gongshan Shahui is that the party of China, and but it involves Huiing together still, right? I think that's why I really like that word a lot, because it does pull together so much. But anyway, that's the last thing I will say. So good luck in everybody in your collectives and in your cooperatives. And I hope that everybody is as, fed and housed as well as you can be managed. Don't forget, of course, everything that we do here at the Silver Spook Games Cooperative is managed and supported by the sales of the game. A lot of it by the sales of Neofeud, which is a dystopic cyberpunk adventure game in the vein of Blade Runner, that is about the social, political, and economic inequality. It's a game about the opposite. I lived for most of my life in the United States occupied territory of Hawaii as a social worker, STEM teacher. It's about economic inequality, capitalism, the police, prison, and military industrial complex, et cetera, et cetera. It's about the opposite of what I have been talking about, as a cautionary tale, hopefully educational for people who like cyberpunk, William Gibson, Blade Runner, Ghost in the Shell, and all the cyberpunk genre. But it does support, the game does support everything that we do here. So if you can leave even a very short review, it is greatly appreciated, because it does increase the likelihood that people will discover this Neofeud on Steam. Thought Slime has said that Thought Slime's comrades have played it and liked it a lot. Thought Slime. So Thought Slime hasn't played yet. Thought Slime got a lot of editing and a lot of work to do. So I don't want to be like, Thought Slime gotta play my game. I believe Mexi might be playing it though. So I'll be interested to talk to Mexi about that soon. If Mexi does on a podcast. But however, until then, here is a leftist who is a Marxist-Leninist who has said, Neofeud explored the depths that make up our capitalist reality, and I found the game to be a multidimensional representation of Marx's Das Kapital. So I just want to say, Marx is somebody who understood that there were important things to learn and to practice cooperating without private individuals exploiting labor value. And Neofeud is definitely about that. On top of other things, that is an important theme for me in the game. Also, you can find Neofeud on itch.io for Windows, Mac, and Linux. If you don't have Windows, you can get it for Mac and Linux. It is on sale there as well, and it is DRM free if you don't like digital rights management. And also, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Neofeud. And for you at patreon.com/Neofeud, you get access to the Discord. So you can get access to some of the online. What's the online meeting? I don't want to oversell that one word, but it is an online space where other members of our community can hang out and talk. And you also get access as a Patreon supporter. You support what we do here in the building of more housing to house more underhoused and homeless Hawaiians and other people who need housing. Build the Silver Spook Hui further. Keep doing the education that we do here, making Neofeud 2. And also, you get the behind-the-scenes updates to things that I'm working on in terms of Neofeud 2. I also have an update on some of the housing in the Patreon as well. I have a picture of some of the housing that Positive Synergy and Holly have worked on. You can also follow at Silver Spook Games at octodon.social. Mastodon, this is a non-capitalist federated social media platform. So Mastodon is trying to hui together instead of, right, have one person with a bunch of underpaid, exploited techno serfs, paying undying fealty to the techno king. His name is Mr. Jack Dorsey, who owns Twitter, who has billions of dollars. Another modern Montesquieu, Mr. Dorsey, who rigs the entire, who is a prime suspect for blasting the world with fire hoses of disinformation through a lot of blue checkmark and promoted and removes indigenous Black Lives Matter and other tweets and information. So Mastodon is better. It's not perfect, but it is better. It, however, does not have the reach of Twitter. So while we have access to the Death Star satellites, you can still follow me also at Silver Spook Guy. At Silver Spook Guy is my personal account, and then also you can follow me at Silver Spook Games, which is here. At Silver Spook Games, minus the E and Silver, for stuff about Neofeud 2 and updates on the game stuff. Fine, you can also follow at Terminus C. I wanted this stream to be like 2 hours or maybe an hour, but I went over time. Oh well. Terminus C is Terminus Cyberstar. Terminus Cyberstar site. Terminus Cyberstar is a cyberpunk like RPG, like Deus Ex, System Shock, kind of retro style game, but it is a cyberpunk RPG made by a handful of folks, including myself, and a bunch of other artists, writers, programmers, and musicians, and programmers. I'm sorry, I gotta go eat food. Level designers, and it is a game that is coming out sometime soon. It will be wish listable on Steam sometime in the near future. So if you want to get that update, you can follow at Terminus C. You can also join the Discord for Terminus Cyberstar. Fun fact. Also, I'm gonna give a shout out to Kate Nix. Holly is a producer and writer with the Kate Nix. There's a program that I forget the name of it, but Holly will post a link. Kate Nix is leading a new show, a variety show, and I forget the name of it. I'm so sorry. Holly will post it in the chat. However, Kate Nix, you should follow Kate Nix, is an entertainer and a good friend of Holly's and closet champion. Kate Nix is the next season of the Lullaby Lounge. That's what Lullaby Lounge is gonna have a season that's on Twitch, and then it also has videos on YouTube. 9 seasons, and part of this show, it's gonna be a variety show. So music, and then some skits and some comedy, and lots of other things happening. And part of this show, Holly is helping to produce this as well. So Holly is hooing with them, which is also a collective, not made for the millions of dollars for Kate. So anyways, so if you remember Terminus Machina, my other game, my Deus Ex Cyberpunk Total Conversion, right? One of my first games I made as Silver Spook. The character Silver Spook comes from this game, Terminus Machina. And I will be showing Silver Spook, the character, this dude, the original Silver Spook with the shades, running away from all the drone bombings by the homeless socialist hacktivist revolutionary trying to liberate iPhone 9 factory worker slaves in downtown San Francisco, being bombed by a plutocracy's AI-run robot missiles and robot cops chasing him around, trying to lock him up in a concentration camp to do mechanical separation of Tyson chicken nuggets. Silver Spook, the original cyberpunk character with a capital P, will be making an appearance in the Kate Nix Lullaby Lounge, and I will be recasting this original role, live action Silver Spook. So if you want to find about that, you want to learn about the freaking live action recurrence of Silver Spook from Terminus Machina, you must follow Kate Nix, the Goblin Mother. Anyway, so I'm just putting it out there. But yeah, anyways, so yeah, that's gonna be a lot of fun. The script, this stuff is currently being worked on, but I'm gonna be doing some. I'm gonna do I voice act Carl Carbon and Silver Spook. I haven't done a lot of like acting like in real life, but I'm gonna try my best. Anyways, so yeah, that's gonna happen, and that's okay. Now we're like I did extra. So thanks to all these people. Watch all these names while I add the next person's name. Thank all these Patreon patrons for all your support. Two people I pledged support. Torvita and William RDT. Torvita, let me try to get this right. Okay. Torvita and William Torbida and William RDT. Okay, thanks everybody who has supported it. And thanks to the new Patreon patrons. It is greatly appreciated, of course, as always. I can't read them all because there's so many. But thanks to all those people. And until next time, keep your Mary Shays Paulus. Be excellent to each other. And hui together. Let's work towards hui, moderate prosperity for all of us together, and our brothers and sisters and the dragons of the earth and the mo'o of the earth. Let us work together for the common prosperity of all of us together. In Aloha Aina, Kuleana, and Pono. I sound like a cyberpunk piece, but anyways, amen. But anyways, I'll be back later on 9 o'clock Pacific time on Twitch. All right, everybody.